Well, greetings everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Breakfast Club with Got That Funk here, and my friend Dev Shell and Sue, Angel
Hey,
Rider. Greetings, salutations. I'm sure we'll have more members flocking in as is normal. And thank you guys for being here on time. Thanks very much.
yeah, no
Just
problem.
before we went live, we were discussing what to talk about first, and I think the sad loss yesterday of Chadwick Boseman is a good place to start. Um, I've only seen, as I just said a moment ago, I've only seen him in a few movies, um, and I thought he was a really great actor. But more importantly, I thought it was off the movies. When I've seen him in lots of interviews, and I don't know, the guy just seemed like a really decent human being to me. Um, and I had no idea he was ill. I didn't know.
Yeah.
So that's because I'm not like a fanboy or anything, but at the same time, I'm kind of surprised I didn't know because I do have Twitter and stuff like that. So, but anyways, what were your sort of thoughts about it? Because you might have seen him in more of his work than I have.
I actually haven't. And I wasn't.
Same.
I can't say that I was a Chadwick Boseman fan. I didn't dislike him. I just wasn't big
Sure.
fan. I'm familiar with a lot of his work. Um, I thought he was fantastic in the Marvel movies. Loved him as Black Panther. But when I heard the news last night that he had passed, yeah, I cried like a baby, and it was not because unlike you, Paul, I don't get really emotional when celebrities pass unless it's somebody that I follow closely. There are certain ones that had really hit me. But yeah, Chadwick Boseman last night hit me, and it had less to do with him and more to do with this year has just been relentless.
Mm.
It's just this unrelenting stream of bad news and bullshit and horrible stuff that just doesn't stop.
And it's only August.
And it's only August. Last night, after I had heard the news, I actually turned my computer off and I turned the news off, and I said I just needed peace, just a moment of peace. Yeah.
What about you, Sue?
Yeah, I'm the same. I haven't really watched his movies, but there's been so many big celebrity deaths that have happened this year. It's just that's the heartbreaking part to me. It's just unbelievable. And I knew that he had been well known, but not that well known, so I wasn't that much of a fan. But anytime there's like a big death or a well known death, I mean it's always pretty sad.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I don't know. I was more sort of like. I was very aware, certainly when Black Panther came out, especially how many people were inspired by the movie and by the role, and I mean, I personally, a lot of people said to me after they saw Black Panther, "Oh, I thought it was overhyped and whatever." I don't. I think it's literally one of the best of the Marvel movies that there were, for the reason that it had an overall message to it about technology and helping less advanced people rather than exploiting them and all that kind of thing. I mean, it's all right there in the undercurrent of it. And most Marvel movies aren't that challenging, so I thought it was a really good, really important Marvel movie. And I thought Marvel, and obviously with the last two as well, they sort of stepped up the game quite a bit. But hello, Michael. How you doing?
Hey, I thought that the modern adaptation of it was something that the world needed at the time.
Yeah, and that's where I was going. Is at the time, a lot of people were like super inspired by it and thought it was about time that a movie like this was made and everything like that. And I can only imagine what it meant to certain people. I also went to see I'm not sure if it was the same year or the next year, but I went to see that movie. It was an animated Spider-Man. It's like Into the Spider-Verse. It's probably one of my favorite of all the it is my favorite Spider-Man movie by far. It's really great animation as well. And one thing that I thought was really interesting, I saw a tweet where a woman had said that her son had seen all the previous Spider-Man movies, and her son was Mexican American and black as well. And so then he went to see the Into the Spider-Verse, where that's the same ethnicity as the character, and immediately he made himself a Spider-Man costume, and he never showed any interest in being Spider-Man before. And I think that sort of speaks very well to the being represented in a movie, and how I think it's difficult for me because I've been part of the majority ethnicity in my culture, so I don't necessarily appreciate how it might feel for that to be a rare thing, to feel represented in a movie. So yeah, I think it's really important. So when someone like Chadwick Boseman, I'm just like, wow. I mean, as much as if that pinched me, just as an average fan, how much of kick in the gut must it be for people who were like really devotees of the whole thing and were really like inspired and motivated by the man.
Either that or like also people who were close to him too. I mean, you can imagine their loss as well. And like Phoenix Writer said, yeah, only 42 years old. That's pretty young. That's what's even more sad about this too.
Well, 43 is definitely very young to go. But like I said, I didn't even know he was ill.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
and that, which means he was ill. They said he was ill for 4 years, and so that means all the movies he's made, all the last 7 movies he's made, he was ill for all of them.
right.
And that's also pretty impressive, as of just a dedication to what you want to be.
What you were saying before about you touched on like so many things that can go like in a million different directions. The Into the Spider-Verse, so it's, changing the topic from like racial things and the importance of some of these movies racially to more of the plots and the different twists and turns. They're doing the same thing. DC is doing the same thing with Batman that Marvel did with Spider-Man rather. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know that.
No.
The Batman movie they're making, and Michael Keaton is putting the cape back on, playing Batman, and Ben Affleck will be in the same movie also as Batman, in the same.
What about George Clooney?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think he'll ever put the cape on again. He blames himself for killing the franchise.
Do you think that's fair? Do you think that he should blame himself?
It was the writing. It was the writing. It was just poorly written. It wasn't George Clooney's fault. I don't think he was a very good Batman, but I think the writing was worse than he was a Batman, if that makes sense.
I just think the Joel Schumacher Batmans were a little bit too, they tried to be a bit too hip and trendy and it was all sort of colorful and shit rather than dark, like the first 2 Batmans were pretty dark. Well, and I thought, even though I've only seen the second Batman movie from Tim Burton, like once, I was blown away by Danny DeVito's Penguin. I actually couldn't believe how good he did it.
Yeah,
and I remember at the time that movie was being made, Robin Williams applied for that job and lost to Danny DeVito. And I remember at the time when I read that, I don't remember where I read it. It might have been Rolling Stone or something, but I read it. I'm just like, how can Robin Williams not be the Penguin? He'd be perfect. But then you see Danny DeVito do it. You take it a completely different direction. I think Robin Williams would have done more of a Burgess Meredith impersonation of the Penguin, like from the TV show, and I think it would have been more like that. So I'm sure that's not what they wanted. So.
Well, the colorful thing, I mean, that can work if it's done right. I mean, look at Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, all the bright colors, all the neon colors and everything. I mean, if it's done right, it can work.
I love the Guardians of the Galaxy first one. The second one was just like, it was an exercise in patience because the jokes weren't that great. And the fact is that the characters on the screen laughed at their own jokes so many times that it was just like, dude, it wasn't that funny. So, yeah.
Baby Groot made that movie.
Oh, yeah. Baby Groot.
I mean, yeah, I am Groot. I don't know. I mean, like I said, it can work. If it's done right, it can work. Joel Schumacher, he just didn't do it right. Especially, which was the one with Poison Ivy? Was that 4?
Poison Ivy, that was the one, Batman Forever, I think.
Yeah. Okay, was that? Yeah, that was terrible. that was terrible.
No, Val Kilmer is Batman as well, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one was. Yeah. See, I only saw the movies. I only saw like the first one, and the second one. And I actually love Jack Nicholson as the Joker.
Right.
But
Not
anyway,
many actors get the kind of gigs that Jack Nicholson gets. He gets to play crazy guys in lots of movies. There's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. There's Batman.
The
There's
Shining.
the Witches. Yeah, The Shining. The Witches of Eastwick. As far as as far as it goes, or whatever. I can't remember, something like that. There's probably more. Yeah, it must be nice to just be able to act as unhinged as you really are, or really want to be. How unhinged do you want to be, Michael? You're looking pretty sedate there, my friend.
I've been through a lot today.
Have you?
Oh dear.
Yeah,
What, work-wise, or
yeah, work-wise, I met my fair share of crazy.
right? Fair enough.
And then I show up and Rob's here, so you know. I'm like, I do this shit for a living, damn it. I can see it in my free time. No,
24-hour crazy for you?
I think the Black Panther is more important than changing the ethnicity of any superhero, because he was always black. And there's a certain age of kid who's going to realize that there was never any movement to, try to include, to make up for the past. He always was that way.
Mm.
And there's others like Rhodey, Iron Man's sidekick in War Machine, who was always black. There was one Green Lantern where, like, it's not like they're taking the same name and putting it on. It was actually like passing the torch. Like, there's a lot of Green Lanterns, and there just happened to be a black one. Those mean more, than like there having to be a whole movement that's getting recognized. I feel like those, it definitely Black Panther.
Speaking of movements being recognized and stuff, an awful lot been going on in the streets over the past week, and I suppose we might as well jump right into that.
What part?
Well, that's the good question, Michael, because it's been like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and it's only been a week since we were here last, and all this stuff is actually new since then. So Jacob Blake got killed. I can't remember if it was last Sunday or what day of the week it was, but every week seems like a month to me at the moment.
he got shot. He's still alive.
Oh, that's right. He got shot. Sorry, my mistake. Yeah. Got shot 7 times, still paralyzed. That's right. But that's right. Sorry. Thank you for the correction as well, because I actually knew that. I'm just so used to them dying these days, when they get shot. Yeah. Sadly.
I have I don't know, like, not even going into like the protests and the riots, because there's both. And not going into Kyle Rittenhouse, the vigilante, without even going into any of that. Just starting at the very beginning, it's already a clusterfuck. I mean, like, that entire situation, even before the cop pulled the trigger, it was already a clusterfuck. Like, the whole thing is a mess. He shouldn't have been there. We're talking about Jacob now. Jacob Blake should not have been there. He was wrong to be there. He was breaking the law by being there. The person who called the cops on him for being there had supposedly filed charges against him for sexual assault. He had his children there in a car that may or may not have been his. I mean, it's like, even before the cop pulled the trigger, the entire thing is a clusterfuck. Then you throw into the mix the cop that within 3 minutes of showing up on the scene.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep, you're good.
Within 3 minutes of showing up on the scene, he pumps full of 7 bullets. So, I mean, it's like clusterfuck on top of clusterfuck, and we haven't even gotten to the response yet.
That's a fact that I hadn't heard yet. So 3 minutes from arrival to gunshots, more or less.
About 3 minutes.
And in that time, there was also 2 attempts at tasering him as well.
And apparently they were saying, oh, that the taser didn't phase him. But then I read elsewhere that the taser actually malfunctioned. And that's what it looked like when you watch the video. That's what it doesn't look like he was under any kind of duress at all. It looked like the taser just didn't work.
Yeah.
So.
And he looked like he was trying to walk away pissed off and just
Yeah, he
leave
looked angry.
the scene. He
As
looked
he should have been.
like he was walking pissed and he was just going to leave.
Right.
Yeah.
At that point, I'm wondering, why didn't the cops just let him go?
Well, especially since he
Why did he
wasn't just
and then shot? Like, was he not free to go when he was walking away pissed?
well,
Like,
especially since he was not who they were there after in the first place.
yeah,
No, he was.
No, well, you talking about the guy last week or the new one, the most recent one?
Jacob.
Jacob
Blake.
Blake.
Yeah, because he actually broke up the fight. He wasn't who initiated
Yeah,
the fight.
but the police were called because he was there. There was a restraining order. He shouldn't have been there. So the police were called because he was there. Yes, he was breaking up a fight. That's what I was saying earlier as you were coming in. From like minute 1, the entire thing is a clusterfuck. From minute 1. And the police being added to the mix only made it worse. Again, I mean, we hear it often. It's another one of those instances where the police just made it worse.
In that instance, like, I'm not a trained police officer, but I'm thinking I've identified somebody who shouldn't be here, just, but the fact that he shouldn't be there, if he's leaving, let him go.
Right.
Report it for a bench warrant and then just pick him up later. Don't
Right.
try to follow him and shoot him.
Because there were multiple situations happening at the same time. There was the fight that he had initially broken up, that he had broken up.
Yeah.
My opinion, being a police officer, that should have been their priority 1 to make sure that was resolved before worrying about him. I mean, there was a warrant out apparently for his arrest. There was a restraining order on him. I mean, he wasn't a nice guy. He wasn't a nice guy.
Some feedback, right? That was some bad feedback there.
Anybody who's defending Jacob Blake as some kind of savior or a nice guy is way off the mark. He was not a nice guy. But I mean, I don't think I'm the nicest guy. You know what I mean? There's that doesn't justify shooting somebody in the back. He went for a knife. Stop lying. No, there is no.
We're getting a lot of feedback, Rob.
Anyway, I just wanted to address what Phoenix Writer said there. I'm going to put it up on the screen again real quick. I got to say, y'all, I'm worried there could be a kook-head dirty cop shooting black guys just to keep the anger hot, which leads to protests, which leads to rioters invading, which pleases Trump. I've had the same thought. And the fact is, I had that thought when George Floyd was murdered, because it just seemed to me that there was Ahmaud Arbery, then Breonna Taylor, and then George Floyd, boom, boom, boom. And it just seemed to me that they were trying to make, it seemed, I know I apologize for being prone to my conspiratorial speculation, but I do have that. It's just, to me, it's just, I don't know. To me, it's Occam's razor. To me, it's just the simplest explanation for how come these things keep happening, bang, 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 bang. And what I am 100% down with the reality that not all police departments and not all cops are bad people or anything like that. Of course not. But at the same time, there's people letting this shit go on, even if they're not participating in it.
Well, Paul, in this regard, I'm actually going to agree with you. I know we tend to disagree about conspiracy things, but one of the things that convinced me was during one of the earlier protests regarding George Floyd. I remember seeing this video where these cops were walking in front of some people who were marching, and the cops kept stopping, and eventually somebody just, they had very little bit of separation. The cop stops dead, and the cop actually stopped and braced himself. So he's basically getting himself ready to be run into. And so, of course, somebody, not even hard, but just kind of like bumps into him, and then they immediately pounce on the guy and start beating the shit out of him and lock and put him in handcuffs. So I'm like, no, you fucking did that because you wanted to take somebody in, you wanted to create an incident, and you went out of your way to do it.
Right. Well, the thing that really gets me about Phoenix's comment and my own sort of suspicions about the timing and is the Kenosha police chief. First of all, he said that they didn't arrest the guy who was walking with, having just killed 2 people and shot a 3rd person. He was walking with his hands up and a gun slung. 2 police vehicles drove right past him, and a 3rd police vehicle told him to get out of the way so they could drive past him. And they say, oh, well, the police chief said 2 things. The first thing he said was, well, no one would be dead if people weren't out after curfew. So blaming the victim, that's just fucking great.
Well, he was out after curfew.
Of course, right? But I think he was making that point as well. I think, but he's saying, if that guy and the victims weren't out, then none of this would have happened. That was his overall point. Basically, that leans harder on the victims than it does on the perp, right? So there's that. And then yesterday, or maybe it was earlier today, I get confused. He said that it's not particularly unusual for the cops to just drive by someone with a gun and their hands up, because a lot of people had guns that night, and the cops couldn't tell that this particular guy was being a problem and everything like that. And here's all I have to say about that: if you have your hands up, don't shoot, arrest me, right? I mean, especially if you've got a gun on you, saying, look, I have this gun and I'm not a threat. That's quite obvious. I think that's the international sign for don't shoot me, come get me, right? Hands up. And they just drove right past because he wasn't what they were looking for.
They had interactions with him.
Right, I saw that.
Those police officers gave them water
and thanked them for what they were doing.
Right, and told them to take care of it, which they basically egged them on. And to your point, Paul, if you remember, it's probably about 3 years ago now, where there was a Black Lives Matter march, and then some guy started shooting at police. And it wasn't even really related. He was actually an ex-cop himself, and he just started like shoot, and he killed like 6 cops, and I think it was Dallas or Houston or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was in Texas.
There were a couple guys marching that did have weapons, black guys, and so they sought out the police to hand over their weapons. Like, hey, look, we're not part of this. We're surrendering to you. We're surrendering our weapons. We don't want to create confusion in an already messed up situation. And the cops they didn't just take their weapons, they arrested them and held them for 7 hours. When here they're coming and saying, hey, look, we're trying to de-escalate and get out of your way. And they treated them like suspects. And the thing is, anyone who's ever fired a weapon knows if those weapons had been fired, you'd fucking know it. Anyone who knows anything about weapons, I mean, you just sniff the barrel, you're going to know if that weapon was recently fired. So clearly they were not the shooters, but they treated them like they had been. But here, a white guy who did kill people. So that's what's.
And he did that within view of those cops.
Yeah.
Not that weapon. What would you guess that was? If you guys have seen the video, 100 yards, 150 yards away, you're going to hear it's an AR-15 go off from that distance.
Yeah. So basically, white killers are not a threat to police, but unarmed black people are. And that's where it comes right down to it. Anyone who wants to say it's not because of bigotry, it's horseshit. Clearly,
From that distance, I definitely would have said that the police should have seen everything that happened with the last shooting with Kyle. And they should have picked him up just as being part of the shooting, even if they didn't think that he was guilty, if they thought he was defending himself. Still, he was part of a shooting. Right. That they could see. They were in armored vehicles. They should have been looking right at where the shooting was happening. It was right down the street, direct line of sight.
Right.
This guy's going to get off, right? You know that because his defense is already going to be self-defense. And the fact is people were trying to disarm him. So I don't think that makes it okay to kill people, though. But at the same time, that's where they're going to go.
Yeah, he may get off, but the self-defense kind of falls apart considering he was in a state other than his home state carrying a weapon that he legally wasn't allowed to carry in that state. So your self-defense falls apart if you're claiming self-defense while committing a crime. So he was already in violation of the law. So, I mean, if the law holds, if it's, if the law is respected.
Well,
then
that's the
he
thing,
can't
because
really
and that's
claim
also
self-defense.
whenever people have tried to make excuses for Eric Garner and those kind of guys getting killed, when Eric Garner literally was guilty of like selling loose cigarettes, so he violated a tax stamp, and you're like, well, he didn't break the law. I'm like, well, then how come you're defending this fucking guy? If Eric Garner deserved to die because he was breaking the law, then
Philandro Castile got shot with his 4-year-old in the back seat,
and he was
he was complying with the order. You know what I mean?
So the self-defense timeline that I've seen put together by people who are very adamant about defending him, the best one I've seen was a dumpster fire. Literally, a dumpster fire was started, and he was involved in trying to put it out. With the people who started that fire were rolling the dumpster, were right there, right? So then when he's trying to put it out, he starts to get chased. Then he hears a gunshot, and he's trying to set up to return fire to the gunshot that he saw, and another guy's coming around the back, and he just turned and shot him, right? Because that guy was trying to stop him from shooting the original guy who shot. So then he's killed someone. Then he runs back the other way, and they chase him. And the guy with the skateboard, tries to hit him from behind and all that. And then in that, he's shooting more people who are trying to pounce on him for the original
Right.
death, right? At each of these points, they're making the argument that it was self-defense in each instance, like one after another. But the entire time, he's across state lines in a state where he's underage to have a firearm, and he should not be putting himself in that kind of a situation whatsoever.
Right.
And that's another thing too with self-defense. Self-defense also falls apart if you are intentionally putting yourself into a situation where you're going to be in danger.
Yeah.
You have your first priority, your first responsibility is to avoid the danger.
Right.
If you're putting yourself in danger, it's no longer self-defense.
When I'm looking at him speaking to cameras that have interviewed him, like right before it, within the same hour, when I see what he's saying, it seems too good to be true that he was just there to be a medic. He's wearing these blue gloves. Like
Right.
Nobody would normally just wear blue gloves in case they're going to come across blood. But he seemingly was setting up his own defense, that he was there to be a medic. And it seems like this was a well thought out thing beforehand. I really do feel like he traveled across state lines, 20 minutes away from his hometown, just for the chance to shoot somebody.
Yeah, and he actually, after the first one, he actually called somebody, says, hey, I just killed somebody.
Yeah.
He fucking called somebody.
I'm sorry to interrupt because this is a good place to chat, but I want to address a slight amount of racism in the chat.
Okay, so that's what I was alluding to earlier. Like all of these shootings, they always drag out the criminal record of the victim. Always they drag it out, and 9 times out of 10, these aren't good people. They're not good people. Quite often, they're awful people. Sometimes it's minor crimes. Sometimes these are really, really shitty people. But they still have constitutional rights.
Thank you.
They still have constitutional rights. It doesn't matter how much of a piece of shit they are. It doesn't matter how guilty they are of something. It doesn't matter what their criminal record says. They are still entitled to due process under the law. And whether they're shot by police while they're walking away or shot by some white punk kid, 17-year-old little shit on the street, their rights have been taken away from them.
Right.
So
it's because of this this tendency online for them to do a deep dive into everyone's personal history that I have not liked the martyrdom of certain people, George Floyd being the biggest one. Like I did, my own sketch of George Floyd's face before I learned about his history, but now I would go to a Black Lives Matter march, but I would never wear a George Floyd T-shirt because I don't stand for George Floyd. I don't like what happened to him.
Here's
You
the
know,
other.
but I don't want to enshrine.
Mike, I got to jump in on this because basically, if you look at George Floyd, yeah, he has a checkered past, but he was also, if you look in more recent times, he was actually attempting to improve his life. He was actually trying to do things better. But that's the other thing too. So basically, it doesn't matter. We could have done something in 1962, but we're forever evil because that's how we get treated. And you know, and fuck Curtis. I just want to say fuck Curtis, and fuck Curtis.
I want to interrupt you, Joe, because I want to say there's no way you did anything in 1962. So don't.
No, I didn't. But see, the thing is, but as far as his little fuck, I mean, he probably will get off. And it pisses me off the worst about it is because basically it's the reverse standing your ground bullshit, where basically the person who's not supposed to be who doesn't actually have the standing your ground, protection somehow gets it because Trayvon Martin was the one standing his ground. Trayvon Martin was the one standing his fucking ground. And so actually, if Trayvon Martin used, according to the Florida law, if Trayvon Martin was using deadly force against George Zimmerman, he had the fucking right under Florida law to do that. But yet his killer, the aggressor, got away. Oh, because he was, Trayvon Martin attacked him. Standing his ground, motherfucker. But and that's what get to me is that basically we don't have rights in this country. Like you guys have some, but I don't, and anyone like me doesn't. The law never ever falls. We never, and like there was a woman shortly after that her husband was menacing her, and she shot into the ceiling just to drive him away. And again, this is a stand your ground state, Florida. So she had, according to the legal right, she had the right to shoot him since he was coming at her with a knife. She just shot into the ceiling just to scare him away, and they convicted her of attempted murder. So in a state where she had the right to stand her ground, and they tried to use the stand your ground defense, nope, fuck you, nigger, you don't get that. That's what we fucking deal with.
Fuck. Sorry. They keep moving up the chat as I try to knock them off. Sorry about that. That was a bit wrong.
The bullshit always is, if you just do what the cop says, nobody's going to get hurt. Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Philando Castile,
Botham Jean.
It's like, seriously, that's like the biggest crock of shit ever.
John Crawford was ambushed and didn't even have a chance to comply. Neither did Tamir Rice. The cops roll up on him, jump out the car, and
2 seconds.
Yeah, so he didn't even have a chance to even respond to the fact that they were there. So I want to hear, is there any way to fucking kick that motherfucker out permanently, just to ban him from the channel? I'm serious. I'm so fucking tired of him.
Yeah, I can do that if you want. I don't normally, but I will this time because it's a bit much. There we go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I feel for Black people in situations like Jacob Blake was in, because if the taser had gone off, just the reaction to the taser could also get him killed. I would hope that somebody getting tased would be able to have enough control over their body to just lay down flat on the ground and let whatever happen, whatever beating, whatever kicking in the ribs, because if you get up at all, you're getting shot. And
did you see?
You're going to start flopping like a fish, and then you're going to look all dangerous, and then dead.
Well, did you see the one just a couple days ago? So I don't know why they're pulling the guy over, whatever. The guy's standing in the street, and he puts his hand. They tell him to stop. He puts his hands on his head. So they come over, and instead of just shackling him up, a cop comes over and
kicks the butt.
So he turns around like, "What the fuck?" And they immediately pounce on him and start, so they created that situation. He was complying, and they literally created a circumstance totally ginned up,
Well, this comes to the whole larger question, which everybody's marching about, which is what the hell are we going to do about the police in America? Because if we accept that there's hope for reform, what should that look like? You know, in terms of actual, not, I mean, I think there's a lot of people are saying it's not, you can't just tweak one or two policies. You need to change the whole structure. And I can't remember who I saw say it, but someone on TV I saw the other day said, you can't change the result unless you change the structure. You know, if you want to change the outcomes, change the structure.
Well, basically what it's going to take is none of this stuff is going to stop until we start holding the police, their administration, basically the leadership in the various police departments, because you can shuffle around, you know, dirty cops and fire them and let them quit and all this kind of stuff, but none of this would go on if the cops at the top weren't allowing it. Because and if anything, the fact that we know that when the, you know, the good so-called good apples do speak up and point out the dirty cops, the good cops get sanctioned, they get fired, or they get threatened, they get moved around, they get denied promotion. So this is that deeply ingrained. It's not the roots of the tree are bad, and so at that point, you know, you basically have to dig up the roots and build it and plant a new tree. Because and I've mentioned before, I'm not going to reiterate the entire case, but I'll always will bring up Marcus Jeter. You know, basically all that leadership, they knew that their cop was dirty and they covered for it. It wasn't until the video surfaced that they had seen, then all of a sudden, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, okay, but what is ripping it up by the roots and planting a new tree look like? Well, does that mean like firing everybody who's a cop and making them all reapply to be a cop?
Yes.
Yes.
And then having more stringent criteria for success?
Yes.
Also, I believe that anyone with a professional license should be on the same playing field as professional license, like electricians, firemen, therapists. I have a website that people could report violations to. All these other professions, you know, doctors, nurses, all of them, except for policemen, right? And it works kind of like Yelp for me. That if I ever had a violation that was proven, it would always be on my record, and everyone could see it, and I could, you know, have problems getting hired and things. They find some of these dirty cops have like 30, 40 different really horrible bad stories to them in their record, and no one ever sees that.
Right. I think they definitely should be public records of complaints against particular officers. Yeah. I mean, you know, like you say, that's for lots of professions. One other thing I would like that's kind of similar to that is you could make the way the police unions protect cops in ways which some of the ways I understand and some of the ways I don't understand. But so from my point of view, cops have a lot of protection, whether it's qualified immunity or the police unions or both. And there needs to be more consequences, and whether those consequences are, criminal punishment or whether they're more financial. For example, you know, we make people who want to operate a vehicle get car insurance. And I honestly think that we're way overdue for firearms insurance. And that's particularly true for police.
Yep.
Because police use firearms as part of their daily jobs. And so therefore, if you accidentally, there is no such thing as an accidental discharge of a firearm, by the way. There's negligent discharge and there's intentional discharge. There's no accidental discharge, just to make that clear. But if you accidentally discharge your firearm, that should be a penalty right there. Right. You know, if you use your firearm, if you draw your firearm on someone who's unarmed, that should be a penalty right there. If you discharge your firearm at someone who's unarmed, frankly, I think you should get the sack pending criminal investigation.
So every time they pull their firearm, there's extra paperwork. That extra paperwork should show up in their public file.
Right.
And extra cost, because if you make people get insurance for firearms, every time they use their firearm irresponsibly, their insurance premiums are going to go up.
I would go further than that. Not just the firearm, just in general. Like, I'm as an engineer. So for my company, I have professional liability insurance. So if I or any of my engineers makes a mistake that's could be viewed as negligent or careless or whatever, and it causes damage to equipment or people, my company will get sued, and that insurance is there to compensate the victims. And I pay like $9,000 a year, and actually no, it's about $12,000 a year in professional liability insurance for like $2 million coverage or something like that. So, but and you're right as far as accidental. I mean, there was a case out in San Francisco. Cop, there's this guy on the ground. He's handcuffed, but he's jockeying, he's jockeying around, and the cop's getting annoyed that he's not sitting totally still. So again, there's no reason to do anything. The guy's eventually going to get tired. But anyway, so the cop reaches, he grabs his gun and just fucking plugs the guy. Now, the cop stated later that, well, he thought he had his taser in his hand. But my thing is, well, why are you tasing anybody who's already, in cuffs? But even if that's the case, and my thing is, even if that's true, even if he legitimately thought, even though have you ever seen the handle of the taser and the gun? They're nothing alike, so I don't really believe him. But even if we take him at his word, that's a level of negligence that means you shouldn't be a fucking cop anymore.
Right.
Now, I mean, in my town, I'm lucky enough that, like you guys were talking about, the police officers' records being public, so everybody knows, right? My town is small enough where there's like 20 cops, and everything they do ends up hitting the newspaper. So we do have, their record is kind of public. We know,
right?
We have one officer, actually, Officer Rivera. This last summer or the summer before, he shot someone's dog. It made the paper. Everybody in town was in it. This year, he was accused of sexually assaulting an abuse victim that needed help. And now, just within the last week, his name has come up again, where it's like, he's being accused of basically brutality. And I mean, I don't know if he's guilty or not, but based on what we publicly know about the guy, he probably is. But the guy who's claiming abuse, I mean,
yeah,
he's the kind of guy that you would kind of hope somebody would put in the back of a van and not have him restrained, and that he's that kind of guy. But still, I mean, like I said, everybody's entitled to rights. But yeah, he's accusing that, and again, it's just like we all know, Officer Rivera. You say his name, everyone in town knows. Oh yeah, the dog killer. Oh, the rapist. Oh yeah.
And the fact that people know there's that many things, like I gotta say, at that point, it's the whole when Cosby was first accused, some people they didn't want to believe it because there's one. Well, it's just one. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Then it's 15. Then it's 20. It's like, when you get to 50, yeah, okay. Even if half of them are lying, 25 are not, which means you're a really bad guy. Well, the thing is, though, in your town, and I agree. I know that those were all reported, but in some places, man,
it's way too much.
Yeah, like the media, they'll call up the local paper and say, or this local radio, ever, and say, "Don't tell anybody," and nobody. You ever watch Leto's Law? It's a law channel on YouTube, and he talked about he was working in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, and he observed some messed up stuff, and he was a newsreader, or he was among other things on a local radio station, and he said that the cops called the person who owned the radio station and said, "Don't report it," and he was all ready to report it, and his boss came to and said, you report it and you lost your job. So meanwhile, it all got swept under the rug, and what it was a drunk cop who went on this high-speed chase, and then when they finally realized it was one of their own, then they had to cover, and of course everybody knew something happened because there's this high-speed chase, cars all over the place. Guy crashed his car, but they couldn't report it because can't make the police look bad. And the answer to GA 5524, yes, I do have electrical engineers in my company, among others.
There's no point in making police look bad. They do a good enough job on their own.
I just wanted to address something I saw here in the chat. Is this Phoenix Wright? I saw a horrific video. It was a white guy the cops had pinned down. He wasn't struggling. He said he couldn't breathe. The cops got an EMT to administer a sedative to the guy. The guy died right there. I think that's mostly right, unless it's a different case to the one I'm thinking, because in Aurora, Michael, do you know about who I'm talking about? What was his name? It was like Elijah somebody.
That's a different one.
I can't think of his last name right now, but yeah, anyway, and the EMTs showed up, and at the direction, I think, of the police officers, they injected 0.5 gram of ketamine directly into his vein, which would go straight to his brain. And I'm pretty sure he died in the hospital shortly afterwards. I don't think he died on the spot.
It was Elijah McClain.
Yeah, Elijah McClain. Thank you. And the thing about that's so disturbing is Elijah McClain had been walking with his face covered, and the person he considered himself a recluse. You know, he was very socially awkward. He didn't really mix with anybody. He was a bit of a hermit. And so he didn't like people seeing his face and stuff. And so he had his face covered, went into the shop. The cops got called because they said there's someone suspicious walking around with his face covered. He gets tackled. He's begging for mercy. And he's literally saying, look, I don't even eat animals. I don't even kill insects, you know. I just wish you guys love, please, you know.
Oh, yes.
And then the EMT guys show up and they give him 0.5 gram of ketamine in the neck. And as someone who knows what the effects of ketamine are, 0.5 gram, especially for someone who's never done it before, is almost certainly lethal. And sure enough, the guy died. And then they have the nerve to say, oh, we don't know if, you know, it was the ketamine that killed him.
Yeah, he wasn't a white guy. It was a black kid.
Yeah, I thought he was a black guy. Yeah.
No, he may be talking about a different case because something I just
You might be talking about a different case then, yeah.
Yeah, because the video I saw just a few weeks ago, so they had this guy, he's actually in a hospital setting, and he was, you know, they basically have his face, they cover his face, and they have the thing kind of pulled back, so he's already making him having difficulty breathing, and because they're basically basically pulling it back over his face, so he's kind of getting a little bit choked. And so because he's not completely still, they're like, oh, he's non-compliant, so they shoot him up with some stuff, and he's begging, please, 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 and then he stops moving, and then they were like, oh fuck, and then they were trying, then you could see like they go into covering their tracks mode, and they start telling the EMTs like, oh, don't do this, don't do that, and the cops are packing up to basically leave. They want to leave the scene and pretend they were never there, and they just choked the guy to death in a chair.
I can't even. Well, what that gets down to is a different issue than the one I was just asking about. But so I'm going to cut to what you were just saying, because that just reveals to me, anyway, personally, a serious lack of humanity on the part of the people we're talking about, and all these police officers, whether it's shooting someone to dead or whether it's shooting someone in the back 7 times who's now paralyzed. There's people say, oh, they don't think of us as human beings, you know, and I understand why people say that, but it's like, I think that they just think I don't know. How does someone think it's okay? I don't know.
Because they don't really see us as fully human, Paul. It's just simple as that.
It's just so hard for me to wrap my head around that. You know what I mean? Because obviously,
as like a profession, there's a certain amount of you have to have the ability to kind of like unplug your humanity, to kind of switch it off. You see a lot of horrible things. You see horrible things being done. There are times when you have to do things that most people don't want to do, wouldn't have it in them to do it, but it must be done. And I think also when you add to that the fact that so many people don't see black people as full people. So that's why, and I see it all the time, people are like, what about all the white people that are killed by cops? What about them? And it's just like, okay, number one, you're not helping your argument. Number one.
Yeah, I know, right?
I mean, you're only proving the point that the police are a problem. That's number one. And number two, like I said, as a profession, there's a certain amount of unplugging they have to do. And when they're dealing with people that they already see as less than human, it's just that much easier to do.
But I don't think you can train someone into having a better sense of humanity. Either you possess that sense of humanity.
No, they don't train. They don't. That's the thing.
I mean, I think you can have it trained out of you, but I don't know if you can have it trained into you.
Right. That's the thing. That's what they do, though. Is that they have it. They're trained to have it taken out. They do the same thing in the military.
Right.
I mean, it's
see, they do. In fact, there was a thing about I saw a thing about this about what happened during World War II, when they said like the number of rounds fired and the number of the number of rounds fired per actual kill is like, it's a ridiculous number. It's like a few thousand rounds per person that gets killed, and in part because they said that even trained soldiers, we kind of have a built-in thing to us, like to not hurt one another. So, it's hard to actually, especially if you're close enough to see the person actually, because it's personal. It's easy if you're shooting a missile or you're firing downrange and you can't really see your target. But if you can see the person's face, to actually kill them is for most people is hard. So
Rittenhouse didn't seem to have too much trouble with it the other day.
Well, no, but again, because of indoctrination. And so one of the things they do, like Rob was talking about in the military, the British did it first, and we followed on. And it was basically they figured out techniques how to breed out the humanity in people so that they're willing and able to do all the horrible things. And then
how do you breed it out of someone who's only 17 though, Joe?
Well, because we're growing up in an environment where they're indoctrinated to think that way, because what's happened over the last 50, 60 years, ever since these techniques have come into play and not only from the military, but also to the police. And because certain segments of our population revere the police, so they this warped sense of law and order, and also share that same not viewing certain people as fully human. So that's the thing. When you have a young mind, it's very easy to wipe that out of a young mind and teach them that it's that whole thing. If all you have is a gun, every problem looks like a target.
I'll say I didn't see Kyle Rittenhouse reload his clip, and that entire bit of footage, like piecemeal together. Not once did I see him reload. He has more confirmed kills than 99% of Marines right now, and he did it with one clip. That guy was training.
Yep. So, and we were talking about, and Michael will be able to confirm this because he was in the military, I think, more recently than I. But, over the last couple of decades, last few decades anyway, the military has made an effort to do away with a lot of the techniques that they used in World War II and Vietnam and Korea, where a lot of the racism is being erased as ways of dealing with your enemy. It's still there to an extent, but it's not what it was.
Right.
I don't know how bad Michael's training was as far as that kind of stuff, but I know with us, they made a point of telling us all the time about how they're not allowed to say certain things. They're not allowed
Rob was on the Breakfast Club, on the very first Breakfast Club podcast, Jamboree podcast. He said something similar to that. He said you get in big trouble if you said anything racist over when he was in Iraq.
It's not like it used to be. It's not like it used to be. The military is making efforts to rein in some of their tactics. I don't know if that affects the effectiveness of the soldiers. I don't know if it creates a friendlier soldier for when after war is over and they have to go back home again. I don't know. But an effort is an effort, I guess. So.
Yeah. Well, and there's definitely a difference. Like my friend Tony, he was in in the military in the late 80s. He got out just before Desert Storm, and he was telling me because when he came home, he joined the Pennsylvania National Guard, and which is the reason why he ended up not getting recalled for the Gulf War. But anyway, he made friends with this nurse who had come from Russia, and she became a U.S. citizen and was in the National Guard in Pennsylvania. And so they were each swapping war stories, stories about basically their time in the military. Her, because she had been in the Russian military at one point, and when he told her some of the techniques and things that he was told to do and say, and basically again treating Russians and Soviets as non-human people, she was appalled because the Russians, who were our big terrible enemy that we were so afraid of, they didn't have the same level of racism in their rhetoric to their soldiers.
Sorry, just the whole Russia against the U.S. and the mortal enemies and the differences in training. It just kind of reminded me of Rocky. And the different tactics they use. Where Rocky was just he's a machine. He's a machine. He had to dehumanize the Russian in his mind in order to beat him. He's a machine, and I have to break this machine apart. And the Russian did the other way. He's just a man.
Right. He's just a man.
He's just a man.
Yeah, but the Russian guy was getting like injections and have like all this scientific super training going on, whereas Rocky was like toting a log up a snowy hill with a chain.
Well,
and
that was all. That was because of its time. That was, rah rah America. We don't need all that.
Yeah. We don't need fancy machines. Yeah, we don't need all this technology.
So it was on display.
Which is hilarious because when you know the composition of the military at that time, the main advantage we had is we out technologied the Soviet military by far. So, as proven in Desert Storm.
By the time I served in the Army, they got rid of a lot of the racist chants that you could have while you were marching, and I think that's a good thing because any video of that could be used as propaganda by the enemy. Right? It would show up in their news. And that was on display in the RNC because Trump tried to make this show of how many hostages he had negotiated to get back. And every time he talked to them about where they were, this guy's held hostage, and he says he was held hostage in Turkey, and Trump negotiated successfully to get him back. And then Trump's like, oh, and Erdogan was working well with us. He's such a good guy. That was the guy that had him hostage, and he's saying right to his face, Erdogan's a good man. No, but he has to say this like with each one of them. Oh, India was working well with us. North Korea.
Yeah, and while Trump was in India, like thousands and thousands of Muslims got chased out of Mumbai, and lots of them were killed as well. There was a big thing because they used the cover of the presidential visit to have this great big ethnic cleansing in Mumbai. Yeah. And that was all because the media was focused on the presidential visit.
That was a nice segue into the RNC, by the way.
No, it isn't.
No, not even. It's too early to go there. It's too early to go there. I did want to address one thing that was in the chat though that I brought up on the. It said GA 5524 said white supremacists have been infiltrating the military for decades. And I can't speak to that point. I've not seen any data pro or against that point. Hi, Kate. However, I think there's a lot of definitely what I would call anecdotal or circumstantial evidence that white supremacists have deliberately been becoming police officers in America for quite some time. I'm thinking, I know it's fiction, but I also know that it's based on a true story, and I know they take a lot of liberties with that sort of thing. But in 2018, the best movie I saw was BlacKkKlansman. And in that movie, it's pretty clear that the white supremacists that they have their meetings, they've got their people in certain places and whatever, and it makes sense if you're going to be a crook, whether you're in the mob or a white supremacist. It makes sense to get a couple of your people, whether they're cousins or brothers or sons or whatever, in that power structure, even if they're not going to be crooked, just so they can report back, what they're up to. So to be honest, I would be more surprised if there wasn't white supremacy, trying to infiltrate the cops for the past 5 or 6 decades.
You know the YouTube channel Gay Family Values.
I used to.
Yeah, I was friends with Brian and Jay for years and years and years and years. We were friends. We're not friends anymore, and it was a choice that was made by them, by Jay, more so probably than anybody else. But Jay, I think he just retired. Was a cop in California for the longest time. He was in the sheriff's department. And he's all rah cop. Of course he is, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And whenever something happened with police, he was always, one of the ones that would say,
Are you talking about integral math?
No, Gay Family Values is the channel.
Okay, right. Sorry, yeah.
He was always rah cop, and that's fine. He was a cop, and that's fine. He was always one of the first. When something happened, he would be one of the first to come out and say, number one, we need to defend our police officers, and number two, you got to wait for the facts to come out. And then a few weeks ago, he started sharing screenshots about some of the protests that he got from a cop website. It's like you can only be a member of this website if you're a police officer. And the article he was sharing was a pretty straightforward but slanted version of what happened. But what really got me were the advertisements in the screenshot. And it was advertisements of things, T-shirts and mugs and that kind of thing, that had symbols on them that aren't in and of themselves white supremacists, but they're things that white supremacists buy into, like the Latin phrase about, like, not giving up your gun, that kind of a thing. That you see all the time. White supremacists, they wear these T-shirts, they have the bumper stickers, they have all of that stuff on a police website, members only police website. They're advertising white supremacist merchandise to the cops.
Well, I mean, basically, I mean, I remember when I was younger, two friends of mine, two good friends of mine, their fathers were cops, one in our hometown and one in Newark, New Jersey. And both of them, their fathers told me, about all the dirty cops on the forces that they belonged to, and unfortunately, like I said, there was nothing they could do about it. But yeah, so I heard this directly from cops, and then I used to bounce for go-go dancers, in my early 20s, and the cop parties were the worst because basically they had the attitude that, who are you going to call? What are you going to do?
Ghostbusters.
Yeah, right. They would take liberties, and one friend of mine who they did a party and I was not there that day. They didn't have a bouncer that time, and basically the three women, her and two other women, were basically trapped in the bathroom and had to call the fire department and call in a fake fire because basically they were going to get gang raped by police.
Jesus.
Because the cops' attitude were like, yeah, no one's going to believe you. You're dancers. No one's going to believe a word you say. We're all cops. And, so you might as well give in now. We can do this easier. We can do this rough was literally what they said.
New Jersey State Troopers that rented a bus and drove to Florida or something in a bus. And they had a massive party in the bus and they destroyed it. Right. A few years ago, there was a scandal.
A few years ago. Well, hell, the whole racial profiling thing broke open here in New Jersey.
Right.
I remember.
Basically, they were state troopers, were doing all kinds of shit. And one of them was this woman. They pulled this. She was like a 55-year-old woman. She was in business. She took out cash. She needed to take out cash for something business related. So I think she was getting a cashier's check or something like that. So she took it out of one account. She was driving to where she was going, and she got pulled over. They illegally searched her car. They found $5,000 cash and just said, "Oh well, you must be doing something with drugs." Took her money, civil asset forfeiture crap. Arrested her, and it was all bullshit. But and then I think it was NBC News actually did like kind of a sting operation with their journalists, like some like the lesser known ones, and basically caught these guys saying and doing things that were patently bigoted, and that's what helped break it open.
The truth is that if there is,
hi Kate, I love your background, by the way. I just had to say that. I couldn't resist.
I wish that was mine. I wish I'd custom made that. Unfortunately, I can't seem to get one of my custom animated backgrounds in here, which is like there's other systems that'll use it, like Zoom will do it. But anyway, what I was saying is that it seems to me that in principle, at least, the cops and the people in charge of them are the ones we should be holding to the highest standards. Like if you're going to become a cop, I want you to actually care about like the law and whether or not you're enforcing justice and all of that stuff. If you're going into police work for some sort of personal advantage or something, like you can't touch us, we're cops, I'm above the law, excuse me, wow, kind of crapola, well, you shouldn't be a cop in the first place. I mean, I'm not saying anything that isn't obvious, but right. I mean, it seems like it has to be said anyway, and that's pretty tragic in and of itself.
Well, before you got here, I was just saying something about that. I mean, we're talking about, you can't if someone has a lack of humanity, I don't know if you can train that into them. I know you can train humanity out of someone, but I don't know if you can really train it into them. And so when you're saying, you want to get someone who cares about the law and also cares about like the community and service and stuff like that, I'm sure there are cops like that, but I don't know. I think those ones aren't the ones we're having the problems with. And clearly those ones aren't in enough positions of power to stop the people from doing the problems. So,
well, I mean, that's what you were just saying is that like it's really easy to train people into horrible things, into losing their humanity, that kind of thing. And I'm sure we've all heard stories about cops who went in with the best of intentions and just sort of got sucked into the old boys club.
right.
The thing is, I mean, people can be deprogrammed, though. We know this actually from the other end, from people on the criminal side, people who, came from a, harsh background where life was devalued and they went out and did a lot of horrible stuff. And then with the right therapy and the right approach that they were able to kind of gain back their humanity. So it can be done. It's just that we don't put any expectation to do that on cops. We just make the excuse, oh, well, their job's really hard. So if they had to just pop off and violate somebody's rights or hurt or kill them, well, that's just something we have to put up with in order to have a safe society.
Yeah, that's a bad argument.
And well, especially since we don't accept that argument with military people fighting in an actual war. We do not accept. We have rules of engagement.
We don't accept it from any profession, Joe. It's not just that. I mean, if you're fucking up and you costing your business money, you're going to lose your job.
Right, but I mean, my point is that if we're trying to make the excuse that their job is so especially hard, worse than everybody else.
That.
But I'm like, if you're in an actual war where there's actually enemies shooting at you at a regular basis, and we don't accept the excuse there, why the fuck should we accept it from cops?
What I think is worse. Michael, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I know that I'm kind of biased here because I'm, financially, I would benefit from this. But do we all think that it would be a good idea for cops to have to do weekly therapy?
Yes, I think it would be a great idea. In fact, I go one step further because when people talk about how well they're under stress all the time, I think really that at least in areas of high stress, like if you're a cop in Camden, New Jersey, Trenton, Newark, the hot spots, Anchorage, Alaska, which apparently is a hot spot, that you should be rotated out of the line. Because if you think about it, with military people, under most circumstances, if you're in combat, unless they can't relieve you, we generally try to pull people out of the line and get them back to the rear so they can basically recoup themselves and get back to to like a base level. And we don't seem to do that with cops. So maybe we need to. Maybe that's a problem. Because again, I'm more than willing. I want to be compassionate to them as well. So maybe that's the thing, is to say you're going to rotate in and out of the zone, and for a while you're going to get desk duty, and it's not a punishment. It's to take care of you.
Well, and part of it is also the training, though. I mean, because like cops only get a couple of months of training, really, and it should be like you should need a degree to be a cop.
Yeah, in Ireland, you need 2 years worth of training.
I see two things working against that. The first is that there are laws stating that a policeman has to live within the city that he's a policeman in some places. And that would keep them from being able to be rotated, because there are some cities where there are no good neighborhoods. And
well, no, but maybe they get desk duty for a while, and then we have to have the attitude that desk duty is not a punishment. It's a way to allow somebody to decompress and still be at work and still be productive, but not be on the line of fire, if you will.
The second thing I see that they've been doing in Denver is the people with the worst records end up on the SWAT team. And it's almost like they're trying to compartmentalize the bad cops into one unit that they never bring out unless they need bullies. And when they need muscle, they call on them, and they let all the good cops be the face of the police department, on the streets, beat cops. And then everyone who has like more than 6 violations, those are the SWAT team.
Honestly, it sounds like making the best out of a bad situation.
Michael said that there are some cities that have there are no good areas. Paterson, New Jersey is such a shitty city that even on The Sopranos, if any Sopranos fans here, they talk about Paterson, New Jersey as being a shithole. I mean, Even on The Sopranos, they talked about it. That's how bad Patterson is.
Okay, I got you covered then. Burlington, Vermont is one of the worst cities because it's boring as fuck. Not because it's a bad city, it's just so dull.
John Oliver has been picking on Danbury, Connecticut. I don't know, the last few weeks, John Oliver's just like, fuck Danbury. Fuck you, Danbury.
Well, to Michael's point about the SWAT, I don't doubt that that's the mindset. Like, let's take the ones that are willing and able to do all the crazy shit and put them all together. The problem is, I actually think it might have been John Oliver talking about how it used to be the only time they would bust the SWAT out would be if there was like a hostage situation or some shootout, something really tense situation. Now a lot of towns, to serve any warrants to anybody who has any violence in their past whatsoever, and even some people that don't have any violence in their past, one town was using, if you had a registered firearm, they just use the SWAT team to serve a warrant on you. And instead of, knocking on the fucking door and at least trying to peacefully, it's like, nope, we're going to do full breach because everyone thinks it's a movie. It's like The Negotiator. We got to put the get the flashbangs and get the explosives, charges to knock the door in and swoop in on repelling lines.
I think it's 50 years of, real quick. I think 50 years of, we talked about this a few weeks ago, of TV shows which basically predicated on this idea that a good cop has to be a little bit bad in order to get the job done. I think it's a very dangerous narrative, and I think it has been preponderant in our pop culture for at least 40 or 50 years. Go ahead, Kate.
Oh yeah, that was all the hell over the 80s. I mean, it's the whole like the rogue cop who destroys 20 cars catching the bad guy, and the commissioner or whatever can't stand him, but he always gets stuff done, so he gets a pass for his bad behavior. I'm looking at you, Beverly Hills Cop and Lethal Weapon. Die Hard and blah 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 blah.
Hill Street Blues.
Yeah, well, I never saw Hill Street Blues, but okay, sure. I was going to say something, and now the SWAT team. What does the SWAT team do all day when they're not being called out to a scene? Do they train? Is that all they do? They get into some big gym-like room and kick each other's ass until they get called? I mean, what do they do?
What do you think, Sue? Haven't heard from you for a while there.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of multitasking here.
Fair enough. No, I have no idea what the SWAT team does. Maybe they play tiddlywinks or whatever. I don't honestly know.
So a lot of cop shows this year have been canceled, like Cops and
yeah, that's right.
But
yeah,
they had plans to bring back Stabler to Law and Order SVU and then have like a spinoff. And it was actually going to be Law and Order Hate Crimes. And they decided to completely scrap it because of what's happened this year, because it would just be too charged. And now it's going to be Law and Order Organized Crime. But Stabler, the character, for like 10 years, he was the bad cop.
Right.
That's right.
The one that everyone rooted for. He was the one that would be tough when they needed the bully. And now he's going to have his own show. And I'm wondering if they're going to change the character. But Law and Order seems to be like the only cop show left.
Well, I think in large measure, because like in SVU, the cops are they're very good cops. The ones that are bad do get rooted out. In fact, that was part of the thing with Stabler, that basically he was getting progressively worse, and then at a certain point they realized this probably isn't good, and then they rotated him off the show. But yeah, I mean, that would have been if you had the Stabler of 10 years ago.
Thing is, that wasn't their realization. It was a contract dispute.
Well, that's true. But
he went on to play a vampire on True Blood right afterwards for more money.
But the thing was, they did crossovers with Chicago PD, and I remember I watched the Law and Order, they're part of the crossover, and it was a good episode. And I started watching the Chicago PD, and I don't remember the white-haired cop's name, but he's basically the same type of character. And I got about 20 minutes into the episode and I couldn't watch it anymore because I'm like, yeah, this is too fucked up, because there's literally a whole police force of that basically that kind of cop.
I'm grabbing the wheel and going,
oh no,
here we go.
But I'm doing a donut. I'm doing a little mini circle here because I do want to sort of get back to this Rittenhouse guy for a second. Because what it reveals about the police on the scene earlier this week in Kenosha really says an awful lot to me. It's not just that they drove past him, and it's not just that like we discussed earlier. I mean, the cops were there before the incident. The cops were there with him and his other. I'm not sure if they're technically Boogaloo Boys or Proud Boys or whatever, but there was a gang of vigilante people who were there to protect businesses. Yeah, they were there.
The kid who shot those three people and killed them.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And the cops were there giving them water and telling them they were glad that they were there and thanking them for their support and all that kind of shit. And here's the thing, and this ties into what I said earlier about the anecdotal evidence that the white supremacists have overtly infiltrated a lot of police departments around the country. Because whether it's about white supremacy or some other issue, the fact that the cops are awfully comfortable with these vigilantes being there should scare the fuck out of all of us. Cops shouldn't want anybody being a vigilante, no matter which side of the argument they're on.
Right.
Anybody who's prepared to pop off live ammunition in a tense public arena shouldn't have the gun in the first place.
The militia culture that is around Michigan and Wisconsin and Minnesota is different. And those
I'm disconnected from that. I've been gone a long time.
The militia culture is there, and those cops would see all of them as just being normal.
Right, but who are militia? A lot of militias. There's a lot. The Venn diagram of militia people and white supremacists. It's not quite a unity set, but there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, like a backstroke worth of overlap.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, if we accept as a operating assumption that policing in America has a white supremacy problem, just overall, not in any specific places, but just overall, what the fuck do you do about that? How do you screen for white supremacy? Because I'm pretty sure that any test questions that you might throw by, people would know what the correct answer is, and therefore just lie if they were a white supremacist to pass the test. You know what I mean? So I don't know how you can
what I was saying, because I really do feel like the interviews he was giving beforehand about how he was there to be a medic was setting up the defense of why he was there, right? I really do feel like he was giving the right answers even beforehand.
Yeah.
Of course, we ended up shooting someone in the back, which is hardly defense, but moving on.
What scares me is that anyone there would have been well served to be wearing face masks for COVID. And if he had been wearing a mask for COVID, he never would have been caught. He would have just driven home, and nobody ever would have known it was him.
Well, another thing that gets me too is I hear a lot of people who are defending him basically saying, "Oh, he's just a kid." The whole he's below 18, and these are the same people when it's poor people, people of color, whatever, foreigners. They're ready to put even an 11 and 12-year-old up as an adult, which has happened even in Florida. And because they should have known, and it's that double standard. But white Christian, oh well, he's a minor, his 18th birthday isn't far off, and you certainly can be. And a friend of mine actually yesterday, day before, said, well, that they think he should treat him as a killer and not as a victim. He certainly wasn't defending himself, but they still said that he should be treated as a minor. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe that's true, but at this point, I'm like, fuck that, because it wouldn't happen the other way around. If it was the other way around, they absolutely would treat a black kid, a Puerto Rican kid, a poor white kid would get treated like an adult. So I'm like, maybe it's not fair, but fuck it. Let's the wheel turns.
So Joe, are you saying that in addition to being tried as an adult in Wisconsin, you'd like to see him be tried as a black man?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Well, see, one thing that I want to say, and this got me in trouble on the old Breakfast Club channel. We used to have a viewer. What was his name? It started with a U. Anyway, it was around about the time I think of Walter Scott got killed, and and I said something along the line because I personally, my opinion is that we don't want to, like this guy Rittenhouse who walked up with a gun around, and some people were saying, if that was a black guy, he would have got shot right away, which is almost empirically definitely true. Having said that, he shouldn't have got shot. He should have been apprehended. What's happening to black people shouldn't be happening. We don't want to lower the bar so that white people also get shot just as frequently.
Right, I agree.
Or just, we want to raise the bar so that people aren't getting shot by the cops full stop, whether they're white, black, or Hispanic or Asian or whatever else. End of the day, the lethal force should always and only ever be a last resort, and in the face of lethal force coming at you in the first place, so like anytime anybody who's unarmed gets killed by the cops, I don't know. To me, there's never a good enough excuse for that.
So if we had like taser rounds, or they had their own power supply, you shoot it at someone, it zorches them and they fall over and you can catch them more easily, like how many more people would be shot, number one, but number two, how much more acceptable do you think that would be in general, not just us personally?
Oh, I think if they had a reliable, non-lethal thing, yeah, as long as, for subduing people, I think you'd still have to have, some oversight to make sure it didn't get crazy, but
well, it's already crazy, Joe. It's already overused.
Yeah.
Way overused. And whilst there's never been any direct evidence that anyone's definitely for sure died from being tasered, there's like hundreds of cases where people have died within 24 hours of being tasered or whatever. And also there's quite a few instances where someone gets tasered and that they hit their head on the pavement so hard they're dead.
Well, I also wonder what
20 miles an hour and you're going to hit your face pretty fucking hard on the pavement. Go ahead, Kate.
I also wonder what the NRA would say. If we tell them, look, you can still shoot people, it just can't be lethal. Do you think they would accept that or not? Because sometimes I get the impression of these groups that are opposed to something or really, really, really want something, that inevitably what it comes down to is that they don't just want it, but they want it a certain way, that they're not willing to compromise. I could bring up another subject where this is more relevant, but I don't know how much you guys want me to change the subject. Point being that I suspect the NRA would be like, wait, we don't get to kill people even though we get to shoot them? Forget it. I suspect.
I think you're totally right, Kate. I think you're completely right. And to Paul's point, I think it lends to, I said a while back that the one danger of the word, and it's unfortunate we're kind of stuck with it now, but the one danger of how we use the word privilege is that, and this is I think the reason why people resist it, is that I think people who hear it and are negative to when they hear that term, they get upset, they get triggered, is that they think that your remedy is going to be to take something away from them. And that's not what I want. You're right, Paul. I don't want the police to start killing more white people. What I want is that should be the baseline, and then everyone else.
Right.
Well,
so the problem is when people hear privilege, they're at least some people, their thinking is, oh well, if you want to take away my privilege, you mean you want to treat me like everybody else. It's like, well, yes, I want you to be treated the same as everybody else, but I want everybody else to be treated like you, not the other way around.
not a segue, but that's the thinking of the zero-sum game where there's only a certain amount of privileges to be handed out, where we could all have these privileges. Just like in economics, when some people say, oh, you're farming out jobs to other countries. Well, we could all have a lot of jobs.
Right. Well, same thing happened with gay marriage, where they were basically trying to say that gay people were looking for special rights or extra rights. And no, they were trying to get the same rights as you, asshole.
Well, and of course, they would reply with, well, sure, they have the same right as we do to get married to a person of the opposite sex. They always pull that crap.
But my response to that, Kate, has always been, yes, but now with gay marriage, you have the right to marry someone of the same sex if you want, just like I do.
Fair enough. Yeah. Damn it, there was something I was going to say. Oh, yeah, I've often wondered, like, if someone went to the NRA and said, look, I don't want to take away your guns. My goal is fewer people getting shot. Now, if we can find a solution where you get to keep your guns, but fewer people get shot, and it's not on the responsibility of the people getting shot to not get shot, You know, the people with the guns have to shoot fewer people. Help me find that solution where you get to keep your guns and fewer people get shot. I wonder what the NRA would say to that.
There is smart gun technology that has been put out there where the only person that can pull the trigger on the gun is the owner of the gun. And the NRA fought against that like crazy.
Did they give reasons?
Well,
I mean,
I think you want to. Well, I think, Kate, I think you're exactly right. And the premise of your question is that they want to be able to kill people. If we all had Star Trek phasers that we could set to stun, not only would people be drawing those weapons way more frequently than they draw guns, and that includes the cops, but it's not just cops. I mean, we'd be fucking stunning each other over fucking barroom arguments.
There would be stunner tag
you name it.
every weekend.
Want to know that you weren't actually going to cause any lasting damage, and you had a Star Trek phaser that you could just go, shut up, whack, you know.
Well, that and
could you imagine every video that? Oh my God!
Everybody had one. It would be the great equalizer.
Every weekend, people would show up for stunner tag matches. They'd bring a beer, like a big case of beer, and they Doritos, and someone would be barbecuing, and all the people would go out and just stunner tag each other for fun. I guarantee.
Well, that's the thing, because it was funny because a lot of the NRA and the I'll say the gun nut element of gun people. They try to put forth this idea. Well, see, if everybody had guns, it would be more peaceful, which of course is bullshit. What would happen is more people would just get shot. Like you said, if we all had stun gun, stun phasers, everyone would have gotten stunned at least once in their life. And I know I've been stunned many times in my life, and I would have stunned them.
But if everybody did have that sort of stun thing, I mean, this is just pure mind games at this moment. But like, if everybody had, it would create a completely different level of reality. Because if you would have to guard your behavior. If at a moment's notice any random could fucking drop your ass, we would all have to be pretty much walking on eggshells. I think,
Yeah, a lot of people get stunned in crosswalks, I bet. A lot of jaywalkers getting run over as bystanders zap them in the middle of the street.
Yeah, there's no evidence of any deterrent effect, which is why I blanch whenever I hear the expression an armed society is a polite society. It's actually a self-refuting statement, because it's just literally saying if we all had the ability to apply deadly force for rudeness, people wouldn't be as rude, which is one of the most rude things I can think of. Like, hey, if you're rude to me, I might take your life. That's not polite. That's
right. An armed society is a scared society.
Exactly.
I think they're willing to trade that general fear for order, though. I think they like order through fear. Yes. Again, just speculating. But
order through fear. The Republican National Convention just happened this week, and that's a really good segue. I mean, I know it's like a complete left turn and another left turn and a hairpin turn to the right.
It's a right turn.
Yeah, and I went and caused it. I was the catalyst for this chaos. That's honestly, that sounds like something a supervillain would say. I'm totally cool with that.
The RNC was a clusterfuck for a million different reasons, and we will probably talk about all of them. But one of the things that I think I haven't seen pointed out a lot, that I would like to talk about a little bit, is the hypocrisy within the speakers themselves. Like, it was based on fear, right? We all knew that. We knew that before they aired anything, that it was going to be fear-mongering, because that's what the Republican Party has always done, and it has been amplified under Trump. But they would have one speaker talk about, it doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what your religion is or your skin color, doesn't matter who you love, there's a home for you here in the Republican Party. And then the very next speaker would say, the Democrats are supporting people who live ungodly lives. Anti-gay and anti-Muslim, the very next speaker. So it was just like a complete and total clusterfuck that lacked a message other than be very afraid.
And they couldn't come out and just say that gay people are welcome here. They said it doesn't matter who you love. And they can't say gays are welcome. They can't say lesbians welcome. They can't say Black Lives Matter. They can't
Because
say
they don't actually believe any of those things. That's why.
Yep, it's
But
the way
the
my
thing-
take. Yeah, I'll tell you what. My takeaway from it, and I'm going to tell you, I have the parallel to this. Is imagine, you remember those Pentecostal revivals where everybody's hooping and hollering and they're doing the because they had a lot of that in there, but very political. And it was like it's like and it's like, but it's like probably without or maybe with the speaking in tongues, but it felt like one of these political revivals. It was driving me nuts. It's like really, it's like they were honing in, they were pushing the hard right religious, the hard right Catholics, especially because Joe Biden's a Catholic too. But
we'll
I
get to
admit I didn't watch any of the conventions. I've only seen news reports on them. But you know how, like, what would make, say, the Republican National Committee, one of these revivals you're talking about? Again, did someone mention? Oh gosh, which one is it? The Proud Boys that did the music for "God's Not Dead," or is that the horrible like rights group, the Take Away Your Rights group, the hate group?
I get my bigots confused as well, Kate. I don't know.
Yeah, because like I know the people who did the music for the God's Not Dead movie. I'm pretty sure they had either Boys or Proud in their name, but I can't remember exactly.
Newsboys?
What?
The Newsboys?
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Oh yeah, that group. Yeah.
Have them play the Republican committee or the convention, and then you got your big tent revival.
Oh, that's true. Because it doesn't have much.
One thing that really struck me about the convention, I mean, like Rob said a moment ago, fear was definitely the overall. That's the big circle theme of the convention, which they had all these smaller circles inside that, but it all comes back to fear. But one thing that I noticed was a common theme throughout all 4 nights that every speaker more or less touched on was the Democrats want to take away your choice for education for parents. They take the educational choice away from parents, which is all about vouchers and the end of public education as we know it, which is interesting to me because they bragged before the convention and all week during the convention how there's no platform. We're not announcing a formal platform. Well, if you were paying attention, the platform is to get rid of public education and bring in school vouchers. That's one of the things that they, like you say, they don't come right out and say certain things, but that's definitely there. The other thing I want to say real quick, before I let anybody else say anything, because I'm taking up my time here, is this. So yeah, the fear, the education, and obviously this whole thing about how the Democrats are going to lead us to anarchy and destruction. I mean, it wasn't just fear. It was tribalism on a level that I literally couldn't believe. I mean, they're basically telling their portion of the country, and I guess they hope it's a majority, that the other significant minority, the other 49.9% of us, are bad and must be dealt with. And that's fucking scary as hell.
Well, the thing that got me about that line is because it went even further than that. And it's basically like, look at America. Everything's falling apart. Everything's broken. Everything's on fire. That's Joe Biden's America. So you need Trump to come and fix it. And I'm like, no, this is Trump's America, motherfucker. This is what you brought. This is what under you. So you're saying that the only person who can fix the things that happened while you were president is you. What?
The only person who can save you from Donald Trump is Donald Trump.
Wow, that sounds exactly like the argument for God.
So,
Right.
Kate, I just tweeted at you the most relevant thing for you to know about the RNC, and that's Kimberly Guilfoyle. Kimberly Guilfoyle, when she was speaking, she was so coked out when she was speaking, and so energetic that all of Twitter was alight with Rita Repulsa from the Power Rangers. And they were comparing her to Rita Repulsa
as well. Like I think Cruella DeVille came up a couple of times. Yeah. I mean, like she went so trendy viral on the internet that even I saw it without watching the convention. I had to find out who she was because I'd never heard of her. But when I did, I was like, oh, okay.
Kimberly Guilfoyle's speech, right? I mean, she was successful insofar as it was one of the most talked about things the next day. So she managed to get herself talked about, which if that was the goal of her delivery, I guess it was successful. Having said that, she was delivering to a camera and a crew, a speech which was clearly designed both in its writing structure as well as its delivery. It meant to be delivered to a crowd, and so it came across as even like way more ridiculous than it even really needed to be.
I mean, I saw the video. It was clear at the end. She wanted to be on a horse with a sword. Who will follow me? That was clearly. You know, and while I was watching it, they cut away really quickly. But I was like, wait, did the crowd cheer at the end? And then I realized there was no crowd through the whole fucking thing.
If she had been in front of a crowd, it would not have come across as so crazy and over the top, because she would have been yelling over the top of people cheering. She would have had spots where it was clear for her to pause, and it was written. You could tell that it was written for her to pause at applause lines. So I mean, it wouldn't have. I mean, in all fairness, you got to, in all fairness, if she had been in front of a crowd, it wouldn't have looked as crazy. I mean, the content of it is still insane.
Yeah.
And the thing is,
why didn't they have a dude with a soundboard to like add applause to it?
and to Kate's point about the imagery, that's one thing and it's been true of Republicans for a very long time, but what they react to, they don't really care about policy. They care about imagery. Like the reason why they all loved Ronald Reagan was shining city on a hill. It's all this fantasy bullshit in their head. And look, I like a good fantasy too. I play role-playing games. I play a lot of stuff. But that's fantasy. It's not the real world. In the real world, none of that other shit matters. What matters is, the when the rubber meets the road, what are you going to do?
Are you saying you
one of
don't
the
want to
main
win
things
one
about
for the Gipper? Is that what you're saying? You don't want to win one for the Gipper?
I don't.
It's a two-pronged approach, Joe. It's a two-pronged approach. First, they stroke your patriotism ego by, the shining city on the hill and 1,000 points of light and, all of these, soaring descriptions of the country and the people in it. And then they hit you with the other side saying, but if we lose, it's going to be our... Yeah,
destruction, terror, and mayhem.
Terror and mayhem.
Isn't that kind of the opposite of what the Democrats do? It's like everything's chaos and mayhem. Let's construct the city on the hill.
Exactly.
Yeah, pretty much.
And that's really the difference between the left in general and the right in general. The right is basically, they don't know how to build anything. It's all about that's why they love guns. The only tool they know is like, well, if we have a problem, kill it. People are poor, kill them. Shoot them or something. I don't know.
The left doesn't know how to sell anything.
No,
yes.
That's true.
And the left doesn't know how to sell anything, because you want to know something. The message from the left, and not just now, always is a better message. It's a better vision. It's a better America. It's always better. They just don't know how to sell it. They don't know how to use language.
Oh, gosh.
I would agree with that. Well, I just want to say real quick, because otherwise we're going to get past the point I wanted to make. The RNC thing that.
I think Kate was going to say that she's been saying.
Go ahead, Kate. Sorry. I didn't wait. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if I've said it here, but I've said it before. I'll say it again. The left needs to run all of their slogans past punsters, past wise asses, and past linguists to see how it could be distorted first. Like climate change and the dude with the snowball, right? And so we had to change it to global warming. And then Black Lives Matter, so All Lives Matter came out. Why not say Black Lives Matter too, which sounds a little diminutive, but at the same time, it deprives them of that comeback line. So and like I argued with some of my Seattle friends about changing Chaz to Chop, because I thought Chop sounded violent, would play right into the hands of the people who say, see, black people are violent. So I'm saying run your stuff through a vetting crew of wise asses, punsters, and linguists first.
Yeah, like a committee or something of people who are going to go, no, poke the holes in it first. I just want to say, the theme of fear was pretty pervasive throughout the whole week of the RNC, but it wasn't just that. What didn't even matter who's speaking, whether it's Matt Gaetz or Donald Trump Jr. or any of them, really. But they were, and the Shining City on the Hill example you used a moment ago, Rob, they're constructing this entirely false reality entirely false reality that like when I was watching Donald Trump speak on Monday night, and he's speaking to, I thought, a very specific part of the internet that's already been primed to listen to all those arguments and go, heck yeah, you know what I mean? There's because there's certain conversations. There is such a thing as internet culture. There are certain people like me, and I'm sure some of you, who spend way too much damn time on the internet, right? And and so because there is such a thing as internet culture, and I think that certain people inhabit various different domains in the internet, as it were. And I stay away from all that alt-right stuff as much as possible because I want to retain my sanity and not lose my hope for humanity. But I know it's out there, and I hear these people talking, and I see what they say. So I see Donald Trump or others in the convention speaking to what seems to me like, or Matt Gaetz is another one. They're talking. So some of the Matt Gaetz, he's talking specifically to Fox viewers. Like anything he said could only have made sense if you watch Fox News. Otherwise, it was all just a bunch of gibberish. And that's a lot of them were saying stuff. And I was wondering, because I'm a lefty and I'm watching the RNC and I'm thinking to myself, this doesn't comport with my perceptions of reality in almost any way. And so I'm thinking, are these GOP devotees who are really down the Trump foxhole, are they really watching the DNC a week and a half ago going, this is all bullshit. These people are making all this stuff, just like I was to the RNC.
So, yeah, we live in two different Americas. Trump, it came out today that aides close to Donald Trump, staffers in the White House, basically said that Trump was relishing the anger coming from the left about everything, about the broadcast from the White House.
Right, sure.
And they were talking about it like it was news. Anybody who watched his speech knew that parts of his speech were designed to piss off the left. Like he said, well, I know we're talking to you from, what's the name of this place? What's the, the White House. That's right. That wasn't Trump being cute or funny. I mean, that was absolutely a finger in the eye to everybody on the left who was saying,
and anyone who cares about the law or
he also said about that really disturbed me. He says, I don't think of this as a house, I think of it as a home.
Yeah.
And that's like, hang on a minute, that's the people's house.
Right. And he doesn't believe that. That was just meant to be a finger in your eye.
Right.
It works.
I mean, the president does sort of sleep in the White House, though, right?
Right, but it's not.
It doesn't belong to him, though.
I know. But I mean, hell, there were a lot of times when I didn't own where I was sleeping either. I mean, the line is kind of legit if you take it 100% literally.
The thing is, and to Kate's point, the part of the problem, or the previous point, is that because the right is largely based around imagery. And including the fear stoking about, gays are going to get you and black people and feminists and all this kind of shit. The stuff that's on the left, because of course building things takes more effort and it takes more nuance and subtlety. And those things are tougher concepts to get around and they take more words to get across. Now, I'm not saying we can't come up with better ways than we do, obviously we need to, but it's more difficult. And I remember, you think about like Bill Clinton and Obama, the things that people latched onto where, Clinton was talking about hope, and then for Obama was change, and that's really what people had to jump on. Bernie Sanders, 1%, because basically, unless you have that one thing, all the other litany, even though the other stuff's way more important, it's and unfortunately, a lot of the right wing belief is. It's intuitive, even though most of it's wrong. Like the whole thing about testing people who are on public assistance for drugs. Now, on its surface, that sounds like not a bad thing, because of course we don't want to be funding people's drug habits. But the reality of the matter is, when states actually looked into it and actually started, testing people, it was more costly to actually test them than it was for whatever people were getting over. And also, it also belies another thing, because instead of, to me, if I see that, okay, there's someone who's on public assistance and they're taking drugs, I see that as a public health problem. Okay, let's help that person get off drugs. Not, they're cheating the system and let's hit them with a brick and put them in jail forever.
Like Obama and Bill Clinton, they had mediocre ideas with soaring language, lofty language. Bernie Sanders has lofty ideas and mediocre language.
Well,
The right has old, tried, and failed ideas with lofty language.
Very
It
low.
sells. It's the left is really, really bad at messaging. Doesn't matter how good their ideas are; they're really bad at messaging. And the two that do stand out, like Joe said, are Obama and Bill Clinton. They were really good. They were really good speakers, and they could sell it. So,
well, speaking as a longtime Bernie supporter, hell, I was raised in South Burlington, Vermont, for fuck's sake. I have to say that Bernie kind of has some ideas about how to campaign that are way the hell too old. Because it drove me nuts watching the primary where he would not go for the jugular, where he kept trying to be the nice guy. He kept trying to be the honest guy. He kept trying to be the guy who won purely on his own personal merits. That drove me up the fucking wall because we don't live in that world. And I'm like, Bernie, you're great and all, but please crank up the fire a little, please. And the fact that he didn't, I think, is a huge factor in why he lost. Because people wanted that screaming firebrand.
I just want to address sweet and sour pork in the comments that Kamala Harris pushed 3 strikes and you're out. That's actually a lie because that was passed in the 90s. So you're full of shit and don't know what you're talking about. So if she pushed for it, means she did her job because that's what she was required to do. It's not something that she would have had a choice on. So, you might want to get your
and more to the point, 3 strikes and you're out is not part of the Democratic policy platform for the presidential and it has nothing to do with running for the presidency whatsoever. In fact, in the presidency, you might be able to deal with that in a different way, in a better way, but you can't. Certainly, Trump's not going to deal with that. And this is,
Paul, come on now. If you can't take something from somebody's past and then twist it and misconstrue it and then present it as something completely different than what it was, what kind of country are we living in?
I know, man.
I mean, sometimes I wonder, like if politicians, we invent a flawless lie detector, just pretend for the sake of argument we develop that. And as a result, we end up building shock collars for politicians that are absolutely mandatory, cannot remove them until the end of your term. What would happen? You can decline to answer something, but when you speak, it has to be the truth or it'll zap you. What would that do to politics, I wonder?
George Carlin had a riff about that. He said if honesty was suddenly injected into American politics, the whole system would collapse. No one would know what to do.
Well, you'd absolutely have to want the job is the thing. It's kind of the way I think about cops. If they had to get a degree, you'd have to really want to enforce the law to be a cop. You couldn't do it on a whim. And it'd be the same thing with politicians. It'd be like if their salary was 0, maybe they had to run off of Patreon or something. You'd have to really want to be a politician.
I really wouldn't want that because then we'd have some really unsavory characters who have large Patreon followings.
Yeah, right. That's true.
But I'm just saying in principle, it doesn't have to be exactly that. But I'm just saying is if there was some like for a lot of today's politicians, deal breaker conditions and conditions designed to make it so that when you start doing policy, you have to really care about the policy rather than what it can get you. I wonder what that would do to our world.
Well, I think
sorry, Rob's got to go. He's been waiting.
Sweet and sour pork. Twisted, LOL, sure. Yeah, twisted. You twisted it. There's no way. I mean, you presented something that is factually completely fantasy. It's the 3 strikes and you're out from the 90s. It's completely outdated, has nothing to do with Kamala Harris. And then you're going to go and say, oh, well, she prosecuted it. Of course she did. It was her job. That's what she got paid to do. If she didn't do it, then she would have been wrong. I mean, I don't know why it's hard for people to understand that. If you're hired to do your job, you do your job.
What's really funny is
we're not defending anything. We're just saying if you're hired to do a job, you do your fucking job. I mean, it doesn't matter if I like the policy or not, if I agree with the policy.
It's hilarious to me anyway, because if you look at the
disagree.
opposite contention to that, the opposite contention is that she shouldn't have done her job then, or that if she didn't prosecute the 3 strikes and you're out as Attorney General for California, if she didn't do it, and now she was up to be the vice presidential nominee, you'd be saying, yeah, but she didn't do her job. She didn't do her job.
Well, and we know the right wing has done that, because in states that started, because federal law, marijuana is still illegal. So, but there have been states that where what happened in certain states, they said, look, we're just not going to prosecute it because we just think it's a bullshit law.
Right.
And the right wing, what did they do? They attack those lawmakers and say, hey, you're not doing your job because you're not following the law.
That's exactly what they did.
No.
I have to say that I kind of disagree in principle that if you're hired to do a job, you do the job. Because sometimes the job takes you to some dark-ass places. The first name to pop to mind was Chelsea Manning. Did not do her job, but did the fucking right thing. So there are times when you should not do your bloody job.
But here's the thing. If you're hired to do a job, and then you decide that what the job entails goes against your personal beliefs, then you leave.
Yeah.
Quit. Like, nobody's handcuffed to a job. It doesn't mean like saying she was just doing her job doesn't mean that we agree with the policy or defending the policy. We're just saying the woman was hired to do a job and she did it. There are people that are like, oh, but she was locking up people because their kids didn't go to school. And that's just not true either. It's another one of those things that they pull out of her past and twist.
I want to make the argument that everyone before and after her, maybe in her position, was just really inept. And the percentage of people she did prosecute might have been very low. And she just had a really, really good handle on how to do her job. And there might have been a lot that she didn't prosecute. But the people before and after her were just so totally inept that nothing was getting done during their term of service.
I just want to bring up a comment real quick. 2 corporate hacks on the DNC ticket covered in, I suppose you mean Wall Street money, establishment hacks. This is transparency. True. Okay. Before I let anybody else jump in on that, I just want to have my 2 cents. Whether you think that they're in hock to Wall Street or not is a matter of opinion, and I think you can say that there's a lot of evidence for that. And I'm not necessarily going to disagree with it. But what you can't say is that they're more corrupt than the Trump administration. Whatever complaints you have about Biden and Harris are dwarfed by Trump and his cabal. So I'm sorry, I have no sympathy with that.
I mean, number one, I do think that they are, if not beholden to Wall Street interests, they at least agree with the people to whom they would be beholden. We have footage of Joe Biden way back when saying he was trying really hard to be bribed, to be beholden. And they said, come back when you're 40. Right. Because they didn't know that he was a good enough investment. I look at Biden and Harris. If I look at them just as themselves, ignoring Trump as a factor, I don't want either one as president. They're too dishonest for my taste to be president. And if you're going to bring up Obama, that's a separate topic for me. I have my issues with Obama. Right now I'm talking Biden and Harris, and I don't think they're honest actors. I don't think either one should be president. I don't think either one represents me. I feel disenfranchised by what should nominally be my side, and Biden and Harris are symptoms of that. So
that's K Street. It doesn't mean Wall Street.
No, he's talking about K Street. K Street is where all the lobbyists are.
Yeah. All right.
And like Kate, everything that Kate said is removing Trump from the equation. When you add Trump to the equation, it changes the math a bit. But yeah,
it doesn't change the math for me. When I vote for a president, I vote for someone I actually want, where I agree with at least the majority of what they stand for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've been duped enough by the Democrats by thinking I'm voting for a populist agenda, and it's bullshit. Obama ran on change. That was the word for his campaign. And then he was the compromiser in chief. Fuck that shit. Never again. Fool me once, shame on you.
Well, I've said everything about that I've got to say, so I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole again.
That's all right.
I'm
So,
sick
Kate,
and tired of not getting a good option.
Kate,
Yes,
one
you made
of
that
the
point.
things that I have a problem with right now is that the other options, other than just not voting for the president on your ballot and just voting for everything else, all of the other options aren't even available in all the other states because the coronavirus shut down their ability to petition to get on the ballot. So
Yeah.
we are literally down to like either or nothing at all.
Like
I-
You
I'd
know
love-
what?
I'd
I'll
love to go
take
retard.
nothing at all,
Brock
frankly.
said that there exists-
Kate's going to do or not do whatever she wants going to do. Leave her alone. Let's move on.
as Brock said, there exists better third-party candidates,
Well,
and
actually,
that may or may not be true. That may or may not be true. The problem is especially in this year, they don't stand a chance of winning. It doesn't matter what the 6 people up here think about that idea or about any one of those candidates.
Do we have to go down this road again, please?
Well, hold on. No. No, I mean, number one, you kind of called me out by name, but number two,
And I agree with you. I told you-
I can't. Well, it's not going to work that way. Just don't say my name if you don't want me to reply. Seriously.
I'm agreeing with you, Kate, and you
Okay.
still want to make an argument out of it.
Well, no, that's not what I was going to do. Don't go assuming. I'm saying I actually can be convinced to vote for Biden and Harris. They
Not
just
by
got to
name.
do.
I'm not
Hold
going
on.
to try.
They just have to do a really big ticket progressive item. Medicare for all. Do that, you get my vote. End the wars. Do that, you get my vote. UBI, do that, you get my vote. But they're not willing to move left at all. And that's because everyone is just giving them their vote. I mean, it's something Lawrence O'Donnell said way back in the day, but what he said was, if you want them to listen to you, you have to be willing to not vote for them. And what I see on the left is like just absolute, oh, no matter what, I'm going to vote for you, no matter what, because Trump. Well, that's not going to get us anything we want.
I agree that Biden and Harris are getting the left far too easily. I agree. I agree. I think that everybody that dropped out in the primaries, they dropped out too soon. And it was so that the vote could consolidate behind Joe Biden. That's not even a secret. That was an intentional thing. And because of that, Biden got a fairly easy ride up until this point. So I agree. And you're going to get more from a candidate when they are being held to the fire. Like you're not going to get my vote unless we hear the things we want to hear. And that's not happening to a large enough degree to get a lot of concessions out of Joe Biden. Yes, Kate, I agree with that. But I also understand and recognize that another 4 years of Trump, nobody wins.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Every time we start, and I say we as in the general conversation, not us specifically here, but every time we start having that conversation, it's always, oh, we have this big crisis we have to deal with. We'll do the thing you want to do next time. It's always next time. And again, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I'm sick and tired of doing it. And I don't care if this is Trumpity Trump. At some point, you have to give me my way, or I'm not going to be on board with you. And it doesn't have to be 100% of my way. Like I said, give me one big ticket progressive item, and then I'm on board. And that's better than, say, like Kyle Kulinski will do, because he's insisting on 2 or 3. I want just one right now. That's all it takes.
I understand. I just want to address something that Brock said in the comment section. And I assume it's Brock. There are other people that run the Twitter, but since it's Brock's picture there, I'm going to assume it's Brock. Anyway, says you guys railed against this stuff for years, big money, corruption, big pharmaceutical, all the DNC now. I'm not going to deny any of that. But like I said a minute ago, Brock, compared to Trump, it's not a hard choice for me. And I know that's the lesser of two evils argument, and I know that's not a great argument. But for me, this time around, and I totally hear everything you're saying, Kate, and I have a lot of respect for the fact that you want to come from a point of principle, and I really get it, man. I really do. And I've been saying the same while you haven't been here, by the way. I've been saying the same thing. I understand there's more than one way to be right about this stuff. But from my point of view, for me personally, if I don't affirmatively do what I can to get rid of Trump, then I lost.
All right, I'll tell you what then. Instead of Biden, if I get a solemn promise from every last left-leaning American that they will withhold their vote unless they get concessions, then I'll vote for Biden. Because I need a guarantee of next time. Because it's always empty promises. Every time it's empty promises. So if I can get a guarantee, like some legally binding document, okay, fine, it can be next time. But
the horse of, this election is do or die. We've beaten that horse to death. This is the most consequential election ever. This is the most consequential election ever. You've beaten that horse to death. Eventually, with any lie, I mean, that for years and years and years has been a lie. Eventually, though, the lie becomes true. And it's the boy who cried wolf. Nobody believes you when it's the real thing. And I do believe that this time is the real thing. And it's just hard for a lot of people to take that seriously after hearing over and over and over again, this time is different. This time is different.
So,
I mean, as far as your skepticism, I get it.
Well, to what Sweet and Sour Pork said, what are you, fucking high? Of course I'm not voting Trump. I mean, come on. We've established that Trump is worse, okay? So obviously I'm not voting Trump. When I vote, it'll likely be for something like the Green Party or some other third party, because honestly, I'm going to vote for the people who agree with me politically, and that ain't Biden Harris.
Down ticket, Kate. Have you had a look at your local reps and look down ticket at that at all?
Well, I mean, obviously, yeah. It's not, well, let's put it this way. If every choice for president is a turd, obviously the down ticket races are important too. And the weird thing is how many people try to convince me of that, like I don't already know it. And I'm like, duh, I'm still voting. Of course I'm still voting. The presidency is not the single solitary thing on the ballot, obviously. So, and it's not just you. It's like the entire internet that knows me. They're all like trying to tell me with all this mansplaining advice. I'm like, shut the fuck up. I'm not that stupid. Give me credit for the easy shit.
Hundreds of thousands of people don't vote down ballot, though, so it's not unreasonable to think you might not. I mean, if they're wrong in your case, clearly, because you've made it clear that's not the case, but a lot of people don't because they don't pay attention. So,
well, I guess, but I'd like to think the people who know me well enough to know that I'm not that stupid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What Mage said. Yes.
Trump is always going to be someone like Trump will eventually be the lesser evil if we keep voting for lesser evils.
Yeah.
We had a pause, and there was something that Joe was talking about earlier. It was actually the vice president who was speaking, and he said that Portland is a sample of what you could expect under a Biden presidency in every city. And, this is actually Trump's America that this is happening in. And to me, it reminded me of 9/11, because 10 years before 9/11, they attacked the World Trade Center. In between those two attacks, there was an entire Bill Clinton presidency that happened after the first one and ended before the second one. And in that entire two-term presidency, no terrorist attacks happened against the World Trade Center because they weren't pissed off at our president. And I'm just saying, without Trump as president and creating this climate where people have this sense of unrest in them, you're not going to see that sort of rioting like you're seeing right now.
Right.
People will actually finally be free of Trump.
Right. I agree with that. If you want to stop the riots and stop the marching, I mean, getting rid of Trump isn't going to solve it all by itself. But if we don't have a fascist regime, I think fewer people will hit the streets, because I think they'll try to use their democratic means. They might actually try to call their congressperson or senator or whatever. Or, I mean, there's other things besides marching that we can do. But at the moment, when no one in any of the power structure seems to be listening, marching is the only thing you can do, as well as voting, of course. But they might be trying to, they're stifling the vote.
Oh, and to sweet and sour pork there.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's like
You know what? I didn't say
flirting
dick
with the
splaining.
airlock.
I didn't
Yeah,
say
right.
dick splaining. Okay, so you can't say cunt splaining. I'm sorry. You can say woman
yeah.
splaining. If you want to be salty, say bitch splaining, but it can't be cunt splaining.
And also, just so you know, Bionic Dance is not trans, and she was not born with testicles, as far as I know. I mean, I could be wrong. I wasn't there, but it is my understanding that she is, in fact, genetically female.
And truth to tell, when I was being born, I was kind of upset about it, so I wasn't there to notice.
So, like the transphobic bullshit that you were talking about before there, Sweet and Sour, yeah, just bigotry sucks, dude.
Well,
I can't help it. I want to address this as well. Fascist, as in politic, the left doesn't like. That's like a little too cheap and easy, to be honest, Brock. I mean, at the end of the day, I never called Ronald Reagan a fascist or George H.W. Bush a fascist. I called George W. Bush a warmonger and a war criminal, but I didn't call him fascist. You know,
True.
I call Trump a fascist because the fucking jury is in, the verdict is in, it's unanimous. Fascist. I'm sorry.
People who like the fascists of the 40s like Trump. So
Yeah, and you know, fascism, like okay, the left has a tendency to be pretty precise with their language, and fascist does have a literal definition, and the right is behaving like fascists according to that definition. I realize the word is loaded and charged, and sometimes I think we need just like to wipe the vocabulary clean and start over so people don't have that like knee-jerk lizard brain reaction to certain words. But the right is acting like fascists.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point you just made, Kate, about the words, that's why I avoid using socialist, communist, capitalist, because again, people throw them around and mean different things, and no one really knows what they mean. Or they
we had that argument before about the definition of terrorist, remember? So yeah.
Yeah, so it's best to avoid the loaded words whenever possible. But you're right. In this particular case, yeah, you go look it up, and it's like, yep. Right down the line. So and especially with these things, we're going to put the election off, and we're going to, and now there was a thing earlier today actually where there's the group, there's the intelligence, part of the intelligence community that reports to Congress, oversight, which is like part of their requirement, basically said they're not going to give Congress any more reports on election security for the rest of the election cycle.
Not entirely true. They're not going to give them in-person reports. So there's still, I guess there are select people on the committee or whatever that are going to get the information, but they're not going to do it in person anymore. And they're citing leaks because of leaks.
To what Brock said there, everyone but leftists are now fascists and racists. No, I can point to a lot of people out there who are just royal assholes without the fascism, without that pyramid of power. Like, for example, the anti-abortion crowd, the anti-choice crowd, not fascists, real assholes.
Right. And I can even point people on the left who are racist. So yeah, it's not, there's more racism on the right.
And here's the thing I'll say. I mean, I'm sorry to have to be the master of the obvious here, but I mean, not all conservatives or Republicans are fascists, okay? And but all fascists are conservatives,
right?
Okay. Not all fascists are white supremacists, but all white supremacists are fascists. That's just true in America.
In fact, there's a lot of Republicans, that kind of mainline Republicans that are ditching Trump and running and trying to support, Biden, because they're basically like, no, Trump actually is a fascist, and we care about the country, and we want to stop the actual fascist.
Yeah, Brock, just say fake news and hoax. Why don't you?
I can.
And what Sweet and Sour Pork said, what does choice have to do with me? Who cares what it has to do with me? I care about other people and their reproductive freedom. It doesn't have to be about me. I'm not a fucking conservative, and conservatives only care about themselves.
Bingo.
So in addition to not being able to say Black Lives Matter and various other things like, gays are welcome here. One of the things that Trump couldn't say because he was being weak publicly, he said, many things have a different name now, and they're trying to scare you out of saying what you know to be true. And I knew exactly what he was talking about.
Yeah.
It's pronouns.
Right. Well, to Kate's what were you just saying, Kate? Because it was a good point.
The one about how I care about other people.
Yeah. So a friend of mine who's further left than me, he had posted, an anti-Trump thing, and then a right-wing friend of his did the old, well, are you better off, today than you were 4 years ago? And both I and my friend both replied, yes, but one, it has nothing to do with Trump, and two, I don't give a fuck because I'm not the only person in the United States, and I care about other people. And and look, I'm a business owner. Financially, I'd probably do better under Republicans, but the rest of the country would be burning down like it is now. So I say, I'm willing to give up some financial success to have a better country to live in.
But if that logic was applied to everybody else, then Trump would lose all of his voters in Kentucky. All the former coal miners would actually vote in their own interest.
Right.
So there's some merit to that argument if it's somebody who's, really voting against their own interest and doesn't realize it.
See, if I would be willing to take a pay cut, and I wish everyone else would, if it would give Flint, Michigan good drinking water. I would totally do that. And by the way, Brock, that makes me a fundamentalist. I'm fundamentally in favor of clean drinking water for everybody. Right now, when Michigan doesn't have it, we all kick in $10 a month. Eventually, they will.
Amen. If that makes me a fundamentalist, then I'll wear that hat.
The thing that really bothers me about, I'm going to bring the comment up so there's a visual reference to what I'm just mentioning here. You guys care about people. Such ridiculous nonsense. You guys are the new fundamentalists. Here's the thing. The Republicans have been in power now in the White House and Congress for the first 2 years of Trump's presidency, and in the White House the whole time, obviously. And in that time, 30 million people have lost their health care. Millions of people right now depend on food banks in order to survive, right? People who have jobs.
Right. Uh-oh, Paul
froze.
I think that was actually
that's a great freeze frame though.
But I think my internet just went down. Are you back? Am I back?
You're back. I see you.
I thought
Hello?
you guys were, talking about the chat.
It's all frozen.
Paul, can you bring up Sweet and Sour Pork's not the last comment, the one before?
I think he can't hear
That's
us.
just fucking great.
Paul, we can hear you.
Yeah, he can't hear us at all.
We hear you.
Someone who has the chat up, type it at him. I don't at the moment.
Refreshing.
We see you. We hear you. Paul, it's okay.
What?
Yeah.
Um,
There we go.
yeah, it's a good thing
we
these
go.
streams stay up even when the host leaves.
Well, what's really
I hope
funny?
it does.
Sweet and Sour Pork's talking about the federally mandated healthcare tax. That was actually a right-wing idea. The whole idea was that some people were being free riders, and they were getting health care and weren't paying for it. So the idea was that everyone had to pay into the system if they were going to get benefits from it. It's a right-wing idea, and Mitt Romney instituted it in Massachusetts. So I think it's hilarious, people that think they're conservatives that are against Obamacare, when it was a conservative idea in the first fucking place to be a market-based system, as opposed to what the left actually wants, which is a universal healthcare system, single payer.
See, and I still think that's overreaching. We should start with galactic healthcare and see how it goes first. Yeah, but here's the thing, and maybe this is a radical notion, but actually paying taxes is a patriotic act, which is something that conservatives don't seem to get. But you talk about, why don't you love this country? Well, why don't you love this country enough to kick in a few bucks, huh?
Right.
Come on. Now, granted, a lot of those funds go to places they shouldn't. But at the same time, we wouldn't have that military you love so fucking much if we didn't have taxes.
Time out. I wanted a couple of things I want to address, and I want to ask Paul to do something. First off, I wouldn't pay healthcare for some fat sack of shit who refuses to take care of themselves. If you have a health insurance policy, that's exactly what you're doing. That's what insurance is. You pool your money in with everybody else. Sorry, you might not like it, but that's how it works. Number one.
And that's
Number
cool.
two, Paul, he's now bashed me, Kate, calling Kate tranny, and now he's talking about Joe. I think
well, and actually, before they go, I was going to ask you, motherfucker, do you even have a job?
It's too late. I just got rid of him, Joe. I just kicked him out.
All right. It's always love when people talk about, oh, I don't want to pay for this and pay for that, and you find out they make 12 cents and they haven't paid taxes in 20 years. And like, what the fuck you talking about? Yeah, it's just like all the red staters that they talk about, states living within their means, and you find out that their states are the ones sucking off the government teeth. They are the welfare state. Generally speaking, the blue states are actually the citizens on a per capita basis put in more money than the state gets back. So it's blue states. So it's projection on their part. They're so afraid that they might have to spend a penny more, and meanwhile they don't give a fuck about what they're taking from us. So I had a friend living in a red state that was putting forth this bullshit, and I said, hey, look, we're in New Jersey. New Jersey's the #1 donor state. We put out more money per capita than, compared to what we get back than any state in the country. So way more likely that I'm paying for your sorry lazy ass wherever the fuck you are, Porky, and doing something. Plus the fact that I'm in business. I'm a job creator. So fuck you.
And there was something that was there, but I think it went away when Sweet and Sour Pork was blocked. But it was, we want government to be small. Why? I mean, like, okay, I get that you don't want the government up in your shit, but there's a lot of times where they say small government to their own detriment. And I'm like, just on principle, you want government to be small, but what's the benefit of a small government? What do you get out of it?
Kate, they want government small enough to be in your vagina.
Right.
Well, yeah. But they want it big enough to conquer every nation that has brown people in it.
Exactly. Well, that
somebody had said in the chat earlier, and I think it might have been Sweet and Sour there, had said about how Trump is ending the wars in Afghanistan. The war in Afghanistan. The truth of the matter is there's more troops in the Middle East now than there was when he took office. So the number of troops overseas has increased under Trump.
Right. Plus the fact that I think because another thing they like to say
I have a question for Dev, real quick. My webcam was mildly in the way. Was that kid butt ass naked when he ran past us?
I didn't see him. I think
no, he got a diaper, I think.
Oh, okay.
Well, the thing is, the right wing loves to say stuff like, the government that governs least governs best, and that's horseshit. Because if you're not meeting the minimum basic needs of what your people are, then you're not governing well. The idea now, look, the idea that the government shouldn't be more intrusive than necessary. That's great. That's cool. I agree with that. But the problem is that basically, as they've always continued to say, anarcho-libertarian types refuse to accept responsibility for all the damage they do and everything they do to everybody else. They never want to pay for the stuff they consume and they use, which is why I call them leeches, because they are.
And like some of the best comedy is when you get the right wingers saying, see, the left is shit. When what's going on is the left wing president is trying to fix all of their shit. And it's like, wow, you did such a horrible job governing. No, I inherited a dumpster fire and I tried to make it better.
Plus the right wing is so against the government intrusion, but yet they back the police. Sort of like they against brown people and all that, then they love the police. But if there's but they're all sitting there still pining for Ruby Ridge and Waco and the Bundy clan and all these fucking guys. Then all of a sudden they hated the police.
Earlier today, some guy shared a meme that was comparing Hiroshima 1945 and Detroit 1945 to Hiroshima and Detroit today, and they show Hiroshima as a thriving city today. And they showed it in 1945 post nuclear blast. And Detroit was in 1945 a thriving city, and today is pretty much a dumpster fire. And they said this is a result of liberal policies. And it's like the Japanese government is much closer to democratic socialism than anything we have in the United States.
Yeah, right.
Actually, what you're showing me is how well liberal policies work. You're actually
One-
proving the exact opposite.
One thing
Welfare
about
works
Japan,
great
the reason that
for
Japan and Germany have thriving economies post-war is because they were relieved of the responsibility of needing a military budget. Because the United States, after the war, we said no, we're putting, and the Allies, for that matter, all had troops in Germany, and we had troops. We still have troops in Japan. They're not allowed to have. Well, they have a very limited military. It's tiny. It's token, really,
Right.
and we're in charge of their defense. Now, you think about this. You look at our defense budget. Imagine what we could do with social programs if we were alleviated of the problem of spending money on defense.
Right.
If you take that 782 billion or whatever it was and make all that money or even half of that money on social programs, everyone in this country would be thriving and you wouldn't have to pay any more taxes because we're already taking that money anyway.
Kate would have to find another reason to not vote Biden.
And on top of that, Paul, even if we cut it in half, we'd still be spending more than our two most likely rivals, Russia and China, combined. We'd still be spending more than both of them.
Sorry, what was it you were saying?
Blocked.
I said if we did do that and cut our military budget in half and use the money for social programs, Kate would have to find another reason to not vote for Biden.
No, I have plenty of those. Besides, if Biden wants to do anything with the military to make me vote for him, he has to stop the
He's
wars.
just teasing you.
I know. It's really hard to not explain myself. I'm sorry. Actually, it's funny because I've been seriously considering getting myself tested for autism. So.
Well, the other thing about Detroit is that, of course, that means being very selective because there's parts of Detroit that are actually doing quite well.
I would know about this personally since I live in the Detroit area. I can tell you for sure. Actually, what happened in Detroit, and I can tell you the story, what really decimated Detroit was the riots back in the 1960s. That's what totally did it. Then we had this one particular man, this Coleman A. Young, who he didn't care. It was all about the money, and he got everything. He ran that to the ground. And then anybody after him who tried to help and tried to get it back, they said, oh, no. We want things the same. Finally, we've gotten somebody who's actually been very good, very pro-business, and there are parts that are still dumpster fire. That's true. If you know where you're going in Detroit, you're fine. If you don't know where you're going, you're going to get screwed.
Well,
Everything I know about Detroit is cars and RoboCop. But anyway.
Well, the one thing that I thought was really kind of brilliant at the time when Detroit had its recent collapse a few years back, 5-6 years ago, whenever it was that they said, all right, look, it's getting too expensive to run utilities and services out to areas where most of the people have left. There's like less than 20% occupancy in some neighborhoods. So they were just like, okay, the people in the low occupancy neighborhoods, abandon your home and just take one of the ones that's in the higher occupancy. Just go and take one. It's yours because it's better for us to consolidate the town. And now we can have a more efficient services. And it's brilliant. Yeah, because it's not like anybody could have sold their house. The house values were effectively zero. So, and if people left it, yeah, fine, just free house, go take the house. And I was watching about in some communities where they've set up, to call a community garden would be a vast understatement, would be kind of like, almost like being paternalistic. We're really community farming, where they actually said, "Hey, look, we need to be self-sufficient. We don't have a lot of money in this community, and we don't have access to good food." And where the whole community runs these farms, and they're large, they're decent-sized farms. And now the people will have some good healthy food at a very, very reasonable price.
To the thing about taking homes like that, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm an amazing example of like how well you can live on less than minimum wage when you're not paying rent.
Right.
You have no idea. I've got thousands of bucks in the bank because I'm not paying rent.
Right.
I make like $1,200 a month, which is less than minimum wage, and yet I'm doing great.
Yep.
So
And you live in a pretty expensive city as well.
If we had some way to give everyone their own damn home, this country would improve like you wouldn't believe.
Well, and the proof of that is Utah, a right-wing state. They decided they were going to deal with their homeless. We're not going to round homeless people up and treat them as a criminal problem. We're going to build structures for them and give them a place to live. And things got substantially better, and they're spending far less money by being curative than being punitive.
Yeah.
And
And
some of
wasn't
those
there a
people are
thing
hanging out-
like when Corona hit, there was some city where they took this like abandoned hotel, or maybe it was not abandoned, but no one was going because of the virus, gave a bunch of homeless people rooms in there. And, I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know how that turned out in the end,
do that in
but it was
Vegas.
still great that they just gave homeless people rooms.
That happened in London.
Well, that's why I was kind of disappointed when Bloomberg was mayor. They had the idea to take cruise ships that were no longer in service and convert them for living for basically people who were homeless. And there were people on the left who like attacked the idea, and I'm like, they're taking basically unused structures that have accommodations, because it's not like you can, there's not a lot of free space in Manhattan to build anything. So, hey, you're taking some unused space and you're giving people a place to live. I thought it was a great idea. Probably one of the best things Bloomberg ever, was for.
That does sound pretty amazing. Imagine like going up to someone going, yeah, I was homeless. Now I live in a cruise ship. How awesome would that sound,
Unfortunately, people were like, well, what am I going to say? Where do you live? Well, I live on a cruise ship. I'm like, yes, motherfucker, you have a place to live. That's good.
Yeah, and
Well,
cruise ships have
I was
all the
actually,
infrastructure as well. They've got like kitchens and bathrooms and small sleeping quarters where you can put people safely and securely and everything like that. It's a really good idea.
Well, one of the things I keep hearing about on the right is how no one should have anything they haven't earned. Like your place is based on how much work you do and how successful you are, and da 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 da. We should never give anyone anything for free. And it's like, if you gave people homes, they wouldn't be homeless. They'd probably be healthier. They might have the time to go looking for a job. I mean, this should be a right-wing platform right here.
You could apply for a job if you can put an address on the application.
Mm-hmm.
And as who's going to regulate it? The government. That's what the government's for, and the government's us. That's another right-wing thing that drives me nuts. They act like the government is this like disembodied thing it's like from another dimension, and has nothing to do with us. It just showed up and is in charge of us, and isn't that terrible? Like, no, the government's us, and we as a people can decide what we want our government to do. So,
Govern. We want it to govern.
I am the government. I'm here to help.
This is like, can it be like completely off topic, right? But it's actually not, because you just said a moment ago what you decide government should do. And this is like a complete curveball compared to what we've been talking about. But I live on a mountain, okay, and across the canyon there is another house. Now that guy has 150 acres on his property, and his house is on the property in the 150 acres, right? Some years ago, he wanted to put a new roof on his house. But the person on that mountain over there, 2.5 miles away, said, no, that will spoil my view. And because of zoning rules and everything like that, and when you live in cities, it's obviously even more. Certain places you have to paint your house a certain color, or you can't have terracotta tiles on your roof, and blah blah, all sorts of silly rules. And they exist for like, to give up an area a certain character or whatever. But my attitude is, if you've got 150 acres, you are the neighborhood. I mean, does someone who's 2 miles away get to say, I don't like the color of your roof? I mean, at what point is government and stuff interfering too much? You know what I mean? These things are kind of weird to me.
In their defense, they can see their roof from their helicopter.
Well, and that's certainly a ridiculous rule. But again, that was something made by rich people to protect their own property value, is what it comes down to. That's not something that has anything to do with like the average person. So, and like, for instance, one of the things I heard right wingers complain about is that, somebody puts in like a rain barrel and then they get in trouble for taking water. But I'm like, that on its face might seem bad, but what they're missing is that the way that the water table works and the way we get our water. Most of us get water by groundwater. So if you do anything that stops water, basically effectively excess water from getting to the ground, now you're screwing up the wells, and that's going to screw up other people. It has an impact on other people. And I know it's not obvious, so most people don't know that, but I do work in water and wastewater, and so I actually know that you could actually severely cause a problem. In fact, that's one of the big problems that, again, doesn't get talked about in the West, but one of the big arguments between the Israelis and Palestinians is water rights, because basically the Israelis are in control of all the water, and so they play games with the Palestinians and cut their water off or limit it and all sorts of shit. And that's one of the causes of the conflict, or that perpetuates the conflict.
So for Dev, you said, how do homeless people get mail? I specialize in helping people rebuild their lives, and there are day shelters that only operate during the day for homeless people. They give them showers and whatnot. And the biggest one in Denver is St. Francis, and you can have your mail sent to them, and they hold it for 7 days, and then send it back to the sender. But if you check in with them at least once a week, you're going to get all your mail. And most of the homeless people in Denver use 2323 Curtis Street as their address, and they get their mail just fine.
Madison. Sorry.
There you go. And what everyone needs is somebody who knows this, so in case they do fall through the cracks and have to rebuild their lives, there's a way.
Here's another thing too, though. What you just brought up something very important, Mike, is that now right-wing people will see that and say, oh, that person's cheating the system, they're gaming the system because they don't all live at that address. But you know what? There are a small number of buildings in Delaware that have thousands of companies registered at those addresses because they register in Delaware for tax benefits, and they don't actually occupy that space. And do you ever hear right-wingers can criticize that? And we're talking, that's big money. That's what you're talking about. That's piddly shit money compared to
a lot of them are shell companies.
Yeah, all these shell companies. And then the ones that don't do Delaware, they do like the Cayman Islands or Ireland, and all ways to avoid taxes. And that's big money. But the right wing never criticizes those people gaming the system.
I think it's ironic that Shell is not a shell company.
Also, there are places where they, instead of using P.O. box number, they use something that looks like a normal address. And there are Republicans who say, no, you can't do that because we use P.O. box is something that we screen that people are allowed to get our services on. But people are gaming the system, quote unquote, by using a mailbox that doesn't have P.O. box number on it.
And that's why, and I've being in business, I've been approached by, there's these companies that basically specialize in teaching you how to get around these tax loopholes. And some of what they actually tell you is actually illegal, but you'll probably never get called on it because basically it's stuff that they tell you oh, well, if you go to dinner with your wife and you mention work, then that's a business meal. That's actually not. That actually does not qualify. But people do that shit all the time. So there's literally companies that their job is to teach you how to cheat on your taxes and get away with it. And no one says shit.
I want to ask Republicus what the fuck he's talking about.
Yeah.
That people on the left don't really want to have houses. They don't want homes. And that if they had them, they would just
dilapidate them.
Yeah. What is up with that? I don't know.
I'm in a home. I'm in a house.
I can honestly say I know about 400 men in downtown Denver that does apply to, out of about 5 million people in the state. About 400 that applies to. They're mentally ill, and that's why they're homeless, and they live very horrible lives. But it's a very, very small fraction of people.
Well, I remember a few years back on a forum I was on, and somebody, a right-wing guy, he's doing HVAC work in a government building, something where they get public assistance, and he was so incensed because the caseworker was talking to the person, and the person's hours had gotten cut, and or get a pay raise, whatever. Basically, it was going to the way things changed. It was going to screw up their assistance, and so if without their assistance, they were going to be making less money than they had been to overall, and so they were going to be in a bad way, and they were going to lose their health coverage. So basically, what the caseworker told the person to do is to ask their company to cut their hours a little bit so they could get down below the threshold. And this person thought this was so horrible because now that person's getting they're purposely earning less in their job so they can get public assistance. And Yeah, and again, we were talking about like SNAP benefits, like $137 a month, like piddly shit. I spent that this more than that this week on fucking DoorDash, and it's nothing. It doesn't hurt. Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing. But he was so incensed, and then when I challenged him on corporate stuff, then always like, oh, well, that's bad too. I'm like, yeah, you're full of shit because you never ever bring that up ever. You only ever bring it up if I challenge you on it. Then all of a sudden it's bad, but you never have any solution for that.
I just want to address this thing. Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
That same like 300 or so people that I can point to that do have those mental illnesses, they would have a spot in our state mental health centers if those mental health centers weren't full of sane people. Sane people who just found themselves homeless and had to use the system to try to find some place to stay. If there were houses built for people that had nothing else wrong with them, and they would just become, productive members of society again, all the rest of our systems that are for that one particular person who couldn't have a house like that, they wouldn't be full.
Right.
So I'm suddenly realizing that not eating all day is catching up with me. I'm going to go and eat. So I'll catch you evil geniuses later.
Take care.
Thanks for coming, Kate.
Oh, I didn't react that strongly, but I was glad to be here.
Good night, then.
Yeah, I really have no patience left anymore for any right-wing bullshit. I really have zero. Because it just doesn't work. That's the thing. If it works, at least in part, you might think, okay, that's something we can argue about where the line should be drawn. But every single time their way gets becomes the policy, it always fails miserably.
Well, what I have a hard time with, and unfortunately it seems that Brock is no longer in the chat, but what I have a hard time with, I mean, I can disagree with all sorts of conservative ideas and be quite reasonable about it. And I don't call people who are conservatives fascists just because they're conservatives. And I'm insulted by the inference when someone immediately goes to, oh, you always say, no, Trump's regime is fascist, and it pisses me off. I really get incensed by this whole idea that it's just two equal sides. Because there's two sides, it's not equal. Traditional Republicans, lifelong Republicans must be horrified. I mean, when I was in St. Louis a few weeks ago, my partner's family was all traditionally Republican, and they're absolutely appalled and incensed by what's going on right now.
Yeah.
So, oh, sure, I'm going to copy this thing from my trip.
What Joe was saying, I actually think that the only way that Donald Trump's appointments to each position, all the different departments, the only way that his appointments really make sense is if he's trying to destroy them. Especially Betsy DeVos as Secretary of Education, especially Ben Carson for Housing and Urban Development. The only reason their appointments make sense is that's somebody who's going to completely destroy those social programs.
Same with the head of the EPA and everything else. He's put a lot of people who are deliberately against those departments.
Postmaster General.
Well, hell, energy department, Rick Perry, he said he wanted to get rid of the energy department. They put him in charge of it. I mean, I heard a long time ago someone said about right-wingers that they run on a platform that government doesn't work, and then when they get elected, they go out of their way to prove it.
Yep. Ben Carson speaking at the RNC, I was like, why are you even on that stage? Because during this term, your programs have been cut so far, you hardly even have a department.
Right.
Well, I got to tell you, from watching the RNC, if you want to test to see where you stand on certain issues and you're not sure, watch the RNC. And I tell you what, it's going to change a lot of people real quick. They're going to realize, no, that's not me.
One thing that I noticed about the RNC is, I mean, they did seem to have quite a lot of black speakers on the RNC.
I did too.
Which is kind of interesting considering hardly any black Republicans.
Yeah.
And so from my point of view, it seemed that they were, and from my opinion anyway, they were disproportionately putting black people in front because they saw the DNC narrative as being very sort of inclusive, and they're trying to say, hey, look at us, we're just as inclusive over here. We've even got this Democratic congressperson from the state of, I think, Georgia or South Carolina, who went on and on about how he's a Trump supporter and everything like that. So
a lot of the black folk that they had on there were Democrats, and well, there was the one dude. I think the one you were just talking about. How could he even say he's a Democrat?
Yeah, for all the things that he finds wrong with the Democrats, he should probably switch parties.
And there were two women that were on that. I guess they had a recorded segment, and then after they're like, "Oh, we didn't know what they were doing this for. We never would have agreed if we knew what it was."
That was the immigrants, wasn't it? The
No.
immigrants who he made citizens.
It happened with the immigrants too, but also the women from New York City in the apartment building. They had grievances against the mayor.
Right. Which is fine. I mean, he's not, de Blasio is not the best mayor that ever existed. So, it's reasonable to have grievances against it, but that doesn't mean you're anti all the Democrats or pro-Trump.
In their defense, they had another black person who was genuinely a Republican, but Trump accidentally killed Herman Cain by inviting him to the Tulsa rally and getting him the Rona. And that's tragic.
Well, I remember years ago, I was in North Carolina. This was after the it must have been 92, because it was after the Republican convention in 92. So this person was trying to tell me that, the right wing is a big tent and all this kind of shit. And I'm like, dude, it's a party of angry white men. He goes, yeah, but look at all the black people that were on stage. I'm like, yeah, well, one, there were more black people on the stage than in the audience. And two, most of the ones that were on stage were dancing and singing. So
right.
Having been a part of both parties as a delegate, I can tell you that there were definitely more delegates that were black in the Democratic Party. But when you're just looking at crowds that show up, both parties have a lot of silver-haired people and not a lot of color, and not a lot of youth.
Well, I mean,
that's a problem that we need to address as a nation, I think, because I think getting young people involved in the political process is the most important thing. And the problem is that we've created a structure where they don't feel like they have a voice. I mean, like, look at the sidelining of the progressive movement last week at the DNC was not too egregious, but I kind of felt personally like they were sidelined, So, and that pretty much speaks to the younger part of the party.
The thing is, though, this is something I was ranting about the other day. Tracy Harris had posted something, and then I had commented, and then somebody else, because Tracy's in the same place where you are, Paul. She's like, she has her problems with the Democrats, and she thinks they should be more progressive, but she's like, I'm not. She's like, this is literally apocalyptic time, a moment in time. And so somebody piped up, and again, they were dishing on the DNC, the Democratic Party, and I was like, okay, there's the legitimate criticisms, but my thing is, I point out, I'm like, as far as younger people go, they're literally the millennial generation. So now they're about 26 or 27, up to like in their just before, like upper 30s, like 38 or so. Like, they're actually the largest generation. In fact, they're the largest generation ever. So I'm kind of like, well, you can be all the cynical you want, but if you have the opportunity and you don't show up, you have to at least blame some of that on yourself. I mean,
sure.
That's the things I get pissed about, and that's why I in a way I felt bad for Bernie, because I know he spent a lot of his campaign on young people getting out to vote, because they support him more than anywhere else. And I'm like, so if anything, I'm angry at them, because I'm really fucking angry at them, because I'm like, look, you guys had the opportunity. The rules were changed, so it wasn't as bad as last time. The super delegates didn't get to vote until the end, so they didn't get to influence the other things. I'm like, what? Okay, the last time you could blame the DNC. This time, no. And I'm like, you outnumber the boomers, and generally speaking, Gen X is more closely aligned with millennials than we are with boomers. In
my opinion, the night of the long knives, which is how I describe the what do you call it? The election in South Carolina, which ended up going for Joe. For that one, and it was, I suppose, the night of the long knives, really the next day when Mayor Pete and Amy jumped out of the race and threw their support behind. And also that and the coronavirus. I mean, the two things together kind of really sort of torpedoed the kind of rallying. I mean, Bernie was doing sometimes 2 and 3 rallies a day. You know what I mean? And you can't do that with the coronavirus. You just can't. And the Republicans were doing rallies for longer than Joe and Bernie were. But still, they did rallies for longer than they probably should. And I think they stopped in the nick of time. What were you going to say, Rob?
I'm currently, right now, as we speak, running for political office. And I can't have in-person, get-togethers. I can't do the things that politicians and candidates normally do because of coronavirus. So, yeah, I mean, it's had a massive impact on the way that people campaign. And that was totally, detrimental to Bernie's campaign. I know because it's detrimental to mine. So it's like right now we're struggling to figure out how we're going to do fundraising when you can't do fundraising events.
Right.
Yeah.
There's something I wanted to say real quick. I wanted to just a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit, because we're talking about housing a little while ago. And on Monday night on the RNC, they had that couple that had their, we call them Bunny and Claude. The St. Louis couple, that one had the AR-15 and the other one had the pistol, and they were brandishing their weapons at people who were walking by their house
And each other.
Well, as you guys all know, I was in St. Louis for a couple of weeks last month, and I drove right past their house, and I saw exactly where they live. And I might make a video on my own channel in more detail about this tomorrow, because that little soliloquy that the two of them gave really fucks me off, right? Because they're talking about how your neighborhood's going to disappear and poor houses, the social housing will come near you and blah, blah, blah. All right, friends, listen to this. These people live in a gated community in one of the more wealthy areas in St. Louis. Literally a block and a half from that is a road going perpendicular called the Delmar Road. It's called the Delmar Divide in St. Louis. And it's called the Delmar Divide for a reason. The McCloskey's house, that's the couple, the McCloskeys, their house is worth in St. Louis around about $1 million, 1.2, something like that. In California, the same house would cost you $10, $12 million easily, right? It's a massive mansion. It's humongous. But in St. Louis, it's 1 point something million, right? Literally 2 blocks away, you cross Delmar, and houses start at like 25, 35, 55 grand. And there's houses that are burned out and houses that are falling apart, and no one's done anything to their landscaping for 25 years and whatever. It's the fucking ghetto by any stretch of the definition of the word, right? Really poor housing, really broken down, and the whole thing. It's like 2 blocks away, not even 2 blocks away. So from my point of view, these people going on, you're going to lose your neighborhood, and their neighborhood they're right around the corner. These people. So the whole narrative, they're creating this like false narrative in everyone's head about how there's this suburbia where everybody's happy and skips along, and I just, this whole false narrative that the RNC was dishing out was dangerous from day one, and it got worse throughout the whole thing. Rob, go ahead.
I just want to, in the chat, okay, here's the deal, Republicans.
That's curious, by the way.
Yeah, curious Republicans. If you have all of this vacant housing, right, that nobody's living in, nobody's upkeeping, nobody's maintaining it, nobody's using it, it's sitting vacant, nobody's paying property taxes on it, it's just sitting there, it is becoming eyesores all by themselves. They're falling into ruins all by themselves. If you can take people who are homeless and put them in those houses, you have a higher chance of those people taking care of those houses. You have a higher chance of those people becoming productive members of society and then adding to the tax base,
Right.
which benefits everyone. So saying, oh, you shouldn't give, free housing like that to homeless people because it'll fall into ruins is absolute nonsense. That isn't backed up by anything except for bigotry against poor people.
Right. Plus the fact that it's easy for me in my house, if I have a problem, to go bring in a contractor. My insurance company made me fix some stonework on the house. It was like $8,000. Okay, I could afford that. If you were living in a low income house and you don't have the money, you don't have the means, of course you're not going to fix it up. Not because you don't want to, because you literally can't.
Yeah, no, they will tear them down. Who?
Yeah, who's going to tear them down?
At whose expense?
I mean, he basically thinks poor people are wolves, and actually, wolves behave even better than that. So
Well, like his line of thinking here just makes absolutely no sense, and it really does appear to be based in bigotry against poor people. Like poor people should not be helped, and they should suffer. And if you do help them, they're just going to destroy the help because they're uncivilized.
I just think that before, when I lived in the UK for 30 years, as you guys know, and before I got there, their social housing was different. After I got there, that Margaret Thatcher had changed the whole system before I got there. But before I was in the UK, every local town council built houses. They weren't being built by property developers. They were being built by the local towns with taxation money. And then those houses were given to people who had low incomes on a fixed budget. And I think I'm right in saying that your rent was only 10% of your income, whatever your income was.
Cura says that the poor are disenfranchised, and his solution to this, obviously, is disenfranchising them even further.
right. I mean, and the thing is, if he wants to get into who's going to pay for the housing fixed up, well, then we should. If we're making this kind of housing available, and for that matter, we have the term slumlord. You know what a slumlord is? A slumlord is someone who basically has lower income housing, and then they don't fix anything because no one makes them, and then they cry poverty. And most slumlords are wealthy people, or they become wealthy because they exploit poor people who don't have the political power to fight back.
As somebody who regularly films abandoned houses as part of urban exploration, I can tell you that it doesn't take too long for rodents and rats to just completely tear apart a house to the point where it breeds more infestation for the rest of the community.
Right.
Having someone in the house to at least just sweep the floors and keep rodents to a minimum is a good thing. If you have a house that's blighting the neighborhood, that's completely vacant, it is horrible for the neighborhood because everybody else is going to get mice getting up into their pantries.
Right.
They're going to wonder, where are all these mice coming from? Well, you've got a home for them that you're not, cleaning up.
Yeah,
I just think that there's an overall, like you were saying a moment ago, Joe, there's this overall sort of looking down on poor people, which I find really, really, really disturbing, because as the coronavirus has taught us and other calamities previously, you can be really successful. The 2008 recession was the same. You could be really successful. Everything could be going good in your life. A couple of people in power make a few bad decisions, and all of a sudden you've lost your home, you've lost your car, your wife doesn't want to talk to you anymore, and you can't see your kids. You know what I mean? It is really like that. You can lose everything just like that. And because you can lose everything just like that, we should all understand that we could all be poor. It can happen to anybody. And because it can happen to anybody, we should make it as painless as possible to start at the bottom and work your way back up.
Well, it's just what we were talking before about insurance, though. It's the same principle. It's that you don't know when it could be you. Tomorrow it could be whether it's getting sick or getting into a car accident or having a fire in your home or losing your job or any of those things. You never know. And so basically the whole idea of the safety net is that just because you've fallen on hard times doesn't mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean that you can't build yourself up, or you aren't worthy. And again, I blame a lot of this shit on Calvinism, which I've talked about before. But yeah, it's really perverse. And I'll tell you what, as much as it was super stressful to go through at the time, best thing that ever happened to me in my life was that I was I was never homeless, but I was temporarily extremely poor. And so I got a taste of it. And so I know what that feels like, the desperation of I've got all these bills and I just do not make enough money to pay all my bills. And so I remember I had a spreadsheet, and I used to figure out okay, what bills I could pay and how much I would have to pay to keep things from going to collection or going to the next worst level. And it was this balancing game. And I was literally living on Slim Fast and burritos because it was the only way to make sure that I could get enough nutrition. So Slim Fast was literally I wasn't trying to lose weight. I just wanted to make sure I got enough nutrition.
Right.
And so when I hear people say really ignorant shit about being broke, it makes me so angry because I'm like, you have no fucking idea what you're talking about. You've never been in that situation. You've never struggled. And you think that people are just like sitting around and don't give a shit. No, when you're broke and you're in that situation, it is super stressful. It's you know.
I have a question again for Curious. I mean, you said if you put poor people in housing, they can't repair it if they are economically depressed themselves. But if nobody's repairing it, like, again, you have more of an opportunity of those places being fixed up and being maintained and repaired if there's actually somebody in them.
He said he supports UBI, but if he supports the UBI, you should also then support housing for people. And then, you know what?
Housing is just another form of UBI.
If a person has a public housing and UBI, so they don't have to worry about where their next, dollars coming from, the next meals coming from, they would actually have time to take and the means to take care of their house. Ta-da!
I do want to, because it's getting close to the 3-hour mark, and there's one thing that we didn't get around to talking about earlier, which I kind of want to come back to about the RNC and about also it ties in as well with police brutality and everything, because it was Trump himself on the final night. He did like 75-minute long speech, and he said several times about how. And wasn't just Trump, but he particularly said a lot of times about how we need to strengthen the police and give the police more power and this kind of thing. And I'm just like, he's clearly pitching for the blue vote. Now, I don't know how many people there are in that category of people. And I'm not sure if I really care, but what really bothers me is this whole idea that the cops haven't got enough power. And that comes down to his narrative that, the country's going down the toilet and only he can save it, but we need more power, more authority.
Right.
It's really tiring.
He was like that from the beginning, though. I mean, when he was running in 2016, he said similar things about.
He said he's going to be the law and order president and all that.
Well, not just that. I mean, he was talking about how it should be okay for the police to brutalize people. He said, they want you to be so gentle all the time. I say you hit him in the head when you're putting him in the car.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
I mean,
and what pisses me off about that is the fact that, again, the right wing, that's what they're always getting. The reason why they need all those guns is because in case the government, gets uppity and tries to exert too much power. I'm like, well, remember when you told us to watch out for the government wielding too much power? Well, that's what you voted for, and you apparently seem gleefully willing to vote for it again.
Well, I don't know what's happening. We've had literally millions and millions of people for the past 3 or 4 months marching against police brutality. I mean, you can say they're marching for Black Lives Matter, and that's true as well. But I think it's grown past that in terms of especially because in the first 6 weeks, let's say, of the George Floyd protests, there were literally hundreds and hundreds of videos you could see every week of police brutality. Instances where there's no question the police were acting beyond their legal remit and using excessive force. Instances like, for example, where they just literally walk up to people and start bashing them around. I mean, it literally has been like that. And in the face of that climate, this idea that we're trying to appeal to giving the police more power and to stamping down on dissent even harder, this is what I'm talking about when Brock was here about how we're already at a fascist point. Because this is happening now. Right. This is happening now. And if Trump consolidates his power by getting reelected, there literally is no telling what he won't do. He might dissolve Congress. He might become being a Democrat illegal, or belonging to other political parties besides the Republicans. And any number of fascist things that other fascists have done in the past.
Well, I mean, he already talks like that. I mean, he outwardly says, Democrats want to destroy the country.
Right. That was the whole thing of the Republican convention.
Right. I mean, he doesn't say things like, Democratic policies are going to be bad for the country. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say, I don't agree with Democrats on these issues, and I think what they want to do will be hurtful to people. He doesn't say that. He says Democrats want to destroy the country. They want to destroy this government and this country. And that is dangerous. I mean, it's inciting violence, because people who call themselves patriots, who are these, self-imagined heroes, are going to take to the streets with their guns, and that's exactly what it. I mean, I think it was, don't know if it was his speech or somebody else's. I posted on Facebook that I think it should be illegal for a political speech. In a political speech, for the speaker to say things like, my opponent wants to rape your kittens and drug your horse and take your kids.
That's where I draw the line, my horse, man.
Yeah, I mean, but drugging it especially. But I mean, I think it should be illegal in a political speech to say those kinds of things, because it's no longer freedom of speech when you're inciting a reaction. And the only thing that can come of those kinds of things is a reaction from your supporters. You're inciting violence. You're inciting.
And that's what they're intending too. That's what they're intending. I mean, that's the thing. And I said this before. The thing that always drives me crazy with them is that, it's one thing. Yeah, if you want to say we think the other side doesn't know what they're doing, they're not competent, that their policies are bad. And this is not new. For years, I've heard right wingers say this stuff like, somebody said to me once, I said, well, what makes you think that Democrats want to, or liberals want to do something destructive? And their answer was, well, everybody knows that doesn't work and they want to do it. So therefore they have the intent. And I'm like, well, no, how maybe they can just be wrong. And I'm like, I just playing devil's advocate. Maybe they're just wrong. He's like, no, they want to cause destruction. I'm like, well, no. And see, actually, again, to me, it's projection, because we know that every time they do trickle down, the result is bad.
Exactly what I was going to say. Yes.
They continue to push trickle down.
Oh, they've renamed it though. They kept repeating this throughout the 4 nights. They kept saying a rising tide raises all boats,
which it doesn't.
That's just trickle down economics said a different way.
Exactly, and especially when of course, it ignores all the boats that are moored to the ocean bottom, and get the tide rises over them and swamps them, which is what happens in reality. What
Rob was saying about the reaction that they're inciting, to step away from fascism and comparing Trump to Hitler. When I look at what happened in Kenosha, and I look at what Trump's role as president had in that, Trump is just better at bringing about helter-skelter than Charles Manson was.
What happens if Trump comes out and pulls a Tucker Carlson about this Rittenhouse guy and calls him a hero or some stupid shit like that? What happens? I mean, where do we go with that if that happens? Because he hasn't mentioned Jacob Blake's name in any way, shape, fashion, or form. And he also hasn't mentioned Rittenhouse, and we still haven't had a chance to talk about what the sports have been doing about all this, which I think is kind of inspiring in a way, and also a little bit daunting. But yeah, so Trump hasn't really mentioned anything like that. He's just talked about we have to get football going again, which I think is his way of saying let's get basketball and baseball back on as well, sort of a thing.
No. There's definitely a political division between how he treats football, where white people are the quarterbacks and owners, and basketball. And now that the NBA has gotten the concession that all of their stadiums are going to be turned into polling places, as part of them going back to work, I'm pretty sure he's not wanting the NBA to do well.
Right.
Football is where his base is watching. They're not watching the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, and that was one thing that gets me too. Every time left-wing celebrities take a stand, the right wing always attacks them and say, "Oh, shut up and stick," whether it's acting or sports or whatever. But they never say that to like Ted Nugent or Fred Grandy or Sonny Bono, or the list goes on. Fred Dalton Thompson, and Kid Rock. They never tell right wing people who are celebrities to shut the fuck up. But I was really proud when I saw what they wanted to do, and it made me think of if you remember Jon Stewart's appearance on Crossfire, which pretty much torpedoed the show. That led to it was kind of the beginning of the end of the show. When Tucker Carlson was like, "Well, I thought you were gonna just tell some jokes and blah blah blah," and John said, "No, I'm not gonna be your monkey," and that's what I felt that the NBA was saying to America. No, we're not going to be your monkey. You want us to be the little good monkeys, and I'm using monkey on purpose in the way that racist
Like a hurdy-gurdy monkey, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to go out there to entertain you, because that's all that they really care about for Black people. If we're dancing and singing or entertaining in some other way, then we're good. So they said, no, we're not. Fuck you. If you don't care, if you care so little about our lives, then you're not going to get our be entertained. We're not your slaves, we're not your monkeys, and we're not going to perform for you.
Sure, but I mean, there's an argument to be had that people will make about these guys have contracts and everything like that, blah blah blah. And from my point of view, I think frankly, if you break a contract, you've broken the contract, and therefore all the other terms in the contract, including your remuneration, are in jeopardy.
Sure.
So I think in terms of basketball, I'm not sure if it's going to be the same with football. I know that Major League Baseball is having issues with this. Like, for example, the Cardinals decided to play yesterday in St. Louis, and there was a couple of hundred protesters out there saying that they should have boycotted the game in support of Black Lives Matter. Two of their Black players did boycott the game. They didn't suffer any penalty for doing so. But apparently a couple hundred fans, anyway, at least, thought that they should have boycotted it. And the whole thing is, I mean, I'm the kind of person, I mean, you pick your cause. If your cause is global warming, or if your cause is ponies or whatever, that's cool. I'm not going to tell you your cause is wrong. But I might make your cause my cause if you tell me about it and I believe in it. But you can't just insist that, I don't know. I find the presumption that everybody has to dance to the same. I mean, different people are doing it in different ways, and I don't know. I'm absolutely behind sports players going on strike, as it were. It's to say no. While all this is going on, what's happening to our community is not acceptable. We're not going to accept it anymore, and we're not going to give you your normal back until you give us something approaching normal as well. Because what's normal for us is not fucking good enough. So bring it up. That's what I see happening. That's what I hope.
Yeah.
Is the thrust behind it. What I don't want to see is I don't want to get to. I see the potential for it to go the wrong way, for this pendulum to swing too far the other way and end up causing more damage along the way. So I'm just a bit worried about it. I think it's a good effort, but
I think already in basketball they've already gotten a good result out of it, and they are going to be playing again. Now, as far as people insisting that they do, now again, obviously we can't. No one can force another person to take a stand they don't want to take. That said, I'm not a basketball fan, so I am a baseball fan. So what I can do as a fan, though, is I could say, okay, whichever thing I support, I can say, okay, if the players support the thing I want, then I will go out and spend money, and if they don't, I'm not going to spend my money there. So that's the way it all works. And so, but you're right. I don't think anyone should be forced to boycott or anything if they don't want to. Other than, again, I might I might choose not to support them financially if they don't do things the way I like. But yeah, I thought it was great, and I was very proud that my Mets walked off the field, the other day, and for the same reason. So, and here's the thing for the owners. The owners also had to tread lightly too, because if the owners decided, okay, we're going to start pulling contracts and doing this, that, and the other thing, that could blow up in their faces too.
Certainly, in terms of basketball and football, that's more true than it is for baseball. Because baseball, there's all these minor leagues who have guys just absolutely dying to get up into the majors. So
right.
I don't think it's quite the same in football.
Plus, there's a lot fewer black players than there used to be. Black players used to be 30% of the league. Now they're about 7%. But there is 40% of the league's Hispanic, and so at least some of them support the movement. So.
Well, Well, I don't think it should matter. I mean, it's just, this is the thing. I like, if I was playing baseball or basketball right now, I wouldn't have to be black to support the movement. I'd be like, yeah, you guys want to go on strike? I'm with you. Cause I'm just as sick. I'm just as sick of all this shit as you are, Joe. And we're a different ethnicity. You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter to me. I
might be a smidge sicker of it only because I get affected by it on a daily basis, but
yeah. I support. I support. I just worry that it's going to go the wrong way, and then it end up being used by the other side, as a bludgeon to sort of, I don't know. I'm just worried that it could all go wrong.
Here's the thing, Paul. I'm going to remind you of something you said a couple weeks ago, though, because remember we were talking about the DA, I forget, somewhere in New York. I forget if it was Southern District or if it was New York City or whatever. But basically, bringing stuff to try to dissolve the NRA. And I had said maybe it would have been better to hold it till after the election. And you actually said no, that if it, right or wrong, damn consequences, do the right thing. So I guess I'd say that's kind of how I feel about the sports
Good
stars.
point. Yeah, good point. Listen, guys, we've gone past 3 hours, so I think we should wrap up the public conversation at least. I'd like to thank Phoenix Ryder for being a loyal fan and coming literally almost every single time we've ever done this, as well as Mage Grey Wolf and all the others. Curious, I think Curious left as well. I even thank Curious for coming, even though we kicked him out. He came back and behaved, and so therefore, whatever, that's fine. I don't really like blocking people, but tonight I blocked 3 people. So generally speaking, my rule is not to block people, but when it comes to stupid racist bullshit, my bullshit tank is like this deep.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, so I'll see you guys all in the after show, and everybody out there in the chat, the Green Machine and everybody else. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next time on the Breakfast Club. Same